Revolutionary War's Underground Railroad. Explore the greatest intellectual rivalries and debates in history, the clashes of ideas that moved humanity forward through conflict, competition, and collaboration. But what of the silent rivalries, the hidden debates, the secret clashes that unfolded not in the hallowed halls of academia or the public square, but in the shadows of a world at war? This is the story of a different kind of conflict, a war fought not with muskets and cannons alone, but with whispers and secrets, with invisible ink and coded messages. This is the story of the silent warriors of the American Revolution, the men and women who built a secret railroad of information, a network of spies and couriers that stretched from the heart of British-occupied New York to the headquarters of General George Washington. They were farmers and merchants, tailors and tavern keepers, women of society and enslaved men, all bound by a common cause, freedom. Their story is not one of grand battles and heroic charges, but of quiet courage and selfless sacrifice. It is a story of the invisible threads that wove together the fabric of a new nation, a story of the silent warriors who risked everything for a future they might never see. Their names are not etched on grand monuments, their faces do not adorn the currency of the nation they helped to build. But their legacy is written in the very DNA of America, in the spirit of defiance and the relentless pursuit of liberty that has defined the nation for centuries. This is the story of the Revolutionary War's Underground Railroad, and the silent warriors who built it. In the annals of the American Revolution, the tales of heroism are often painted in broad, vibrant strokes, the thunderous volleys at Lexington and Concord, the desperate winter at Valley Forge, the triumphant surrender at Yorktown. These are the stories of soldiers, of generals, of men who faced their enemy across an open field, their courage a tangible thing, measured in the inches of ground gained or lost. But beneath this grand tapestry of war, another conflict was being waged, a silent, clandestine struggle fought not for territory, but for information. This was a war of shadows, a contest of wits and wills where the most potent weapon was not a bayonet, but a secret, and the most valiant soldier was not the one in uniform, but the one who appeared to be no soldier at all. This is the story of the silent warriors, the intricate web of spies, couriers, and informants who formed the backbone of General George Washington's intelligence operations. They were the eyes and ears of the Continental Army, a network so vital that one of Washington's own spy masters would later declare, "Washington did not really outfight the British. He simply outspied us." This was America's first intelligence agency, a revolutionary underground railroad that moved not people to freedom, but information that would secure the freedom of a nation. Its tracks were the hidden pathways of the mind, its conductors the ordinary men and women who possessed an extraordinary capacity for deception, and its cargo the precious, perishable commodity of truth in a time of universal deceit. To understand this secret war, one must first understand the desperation of its origins. The year is 1776. The initial patriotic fervor that followed the Declaration of Independence has curdled into a grim reality. The Continental Army, a ragtag collection of farmers and tradesmen, is in full retreat. Washington's forces have been driven from Long Island, their spirits as battered as their bodies. The British, a professional fighting force of immense power and discipline, have seized New York City, turning it into the formidable hub of their military operations in North America. From this strategic perch, they can strike at will, their movements a mystery to the beleaguered Americans. Washington, a man of profound foresight and pragmatism, understood the dire nature of his predicament. Outmanned, outgunned, and outmaneuvered, he recognized that conventional warfare alone would not win this war. He needed an edge, an unseen advantage that could level the playing field. He needed to know what the British were planning before they acted, to anticipate their every move, to turn their own strength against them. He needed spies. And so, from the ashes of defeat, a new kind of army was born, an army that would fight its battles in the drawing rooms of loyalist society, in the bustling marketplaces of occupied cities, and along the lonely country roads of Long Island. This was a war where a tailor's gossip could be more valuable than a general's strategy, where a woman's laundry line could become a signaling device, and where an enslaved man's feigned loyalty could unlock the secrets of the British High Command. The story of these silent warriors is the story of the American Revolution as it was truly fought, not just on the battlefield, but in the hearts and minds of a people determined to be free, who were willing to risk the gallows for a cause they believed in, and who understood that in this war for the soul of a new nation, the quietest whisper could be more powerful than the loudest cannon. The architect of this clandestine network was a young and unassuming Yale graduate named Benjamin Tallmadge. A major in the 2nd Continental Light Dragoons, Tallmadge possessed a keen intellect and a natural aptitude for organization. He was a man who understood that the most effective secrets were often hidden in plain sight, and that the most reliable spies were not seasoned soldiers, but ordinary people with an extraordinary commitment to the cause. Washington, recognizing these qualities, gave Tallmadge a mandate that was as simple as it was daunting: create a spy ring in the heart of enemy territory. Tallmadge began by turning to the people he knew and trusted, the friends of his youth from his hometown of Tradecraft, a small community on the northern shore of Long Island. This was a stroke of genius. The bonds of friendship and shared experience, he reasoned, would be far stronger than any allegiance forged in the crucible of war. These were people who had grown up together, who knew each other's families, who shared a common history and a common hope for the future. They were, in a sense, a ready-made network, their loyalty to one another an unbreakable shield against the prying eyes of the enemy. The first to be recruited was Abraham Woodhull, a farmer and Tallmadge's childhood friend. Woodhull was a reluctant spy, a man of quiet disposition who was more comfortable with the rhythms of the land than the intrigues of espionage. But his farm was strategically located, offering a discreet vantage point for observing the movements of British ships in the Long Island Sound. And so, with a heavy heart and a steady resolve, Woodhull agreed to become the linchpin of the new spy ring. He would adopt the pseudonym Samuel Culper, a name that would become synonymous with the secret war for American independence. But Woodhull could not operate alone. He needed a courier, someone who could travel to and from New York City without arousing suspicion. For this crucial role, Tallmadge enlisted Austin Rowe, a tavern keeper from Tradecraft. Rowe was a man of considerable charm and a familiar face to the British soldiers who frequented his establishment. His regular trips to the city to purchase supplies for his tavern provided the perfect cover for his clandestine activities. He would become the vital link in the chain of information, the silent messenger who carried the secrets of the British High Command from the heart of the city to the quiet shores of Long Island. To complete the core of the Tradecraft operation, Tallmadge turned to Caleb Brewster, a daring and resourceful whaleboat captain. Brewster was a man of the sea, his knowledge of the coves and inlets of the Long Island Sound unparalleled. He would be the one to ferry the information across the Sound to Tallmadge, who would then relay it to Washington. Brewster was a man of action, a stark contrast to the cautious Woodhull, but his courage and his skill as a navigator were indispensable to the success of the ring. And then there was Anna Strong, a woman whose contribution to the spy ring was as ingenious as it was subtle. Strong, a neighbor of Woodhull's, devised a system of signals using her clothesline, a seemingly innocuous domestic tool that she transformed into a powerful instrument of espionage. A black petticoat hanging on the line was a signal to Brewster that a message was ready to be picked up. The number of white handkerchiefs hanging alongside it would indicate the specific cove where Woodhull had hidden the message. It was a simple yet brilliant code, a secret language hidden in the everyday rhythms of rural life, a testament to the quiet ingenuity of a woman who found a way to fight for her country from her own backyard. But the most valuable source of information, the man who would become the jewel in the crown of the Culper ring, was yet to be recruited. This was Robert Townsend, a Quaker merchant and journalist living in New York City. Townsend was a man of principle, his Quaker faith instilling in him a deep-seated opposition to war. But his patriotism was stronger than his pacifism, and he agreed to join the ring, adopting the pseudonym Samuel Culper, Jr. His position as a merchant and a society journalist gave him unparalleled access to the British military and loyalist elite. He could move freely in their circles, his ears open to the whispers and rumors that circulated in the coffee houses and drawing rooms of the occupied city. He was the perfect spy, a man whose quiet demeanor and respectable profession made him utterly invisible to the enemy. Together, these 5 individuals, Tallmadge, Woodhull, Rowe, Brewster, Strong, and Townsend, formed the core of the Culper spy ring. They were a motley crew, a collection of ordinary people from different walks of life, united by a common purpose and a shared belief in the cause of liberty. They were the silent warriors, the invisible army that would fight a secret war for the soul of a new nation. Their story is a testament to the power of ordinary people to achieve extraordinary things, a reminder that the greatest acts of heroism are often the ones that go unseen and unsung. The genius of the Culper ring lay not just in the courage of its members, but in the sophistication of its methods. This was not a haphazard affair of whispered secrets in dark alleys, it was a meticulously organized system of tradecraft, a symphony of deception conducted by Major Benjamin Tallmadge with the precision of a master composer. Every element was designed to protect the identities of the agents and ensure the secure passage of information through a landscape teeming with enemies. The life of a spy was a precarious one, the gallows a constant and looming threat. Secrecy was not merely a tactic, it was the very air they breathed. At the heart of this system was a complex web of codes and ciphers. Tallmadge, ever the scholar, devised a numerical substitution system that replaced common words, names, and places with numbers. This was not a simple A equals 1, B equals 2 cipher, but a sophisticated codebook containing 763 specific assignments. General George Washington himself was designated as 711, New York became 727, and even the month of January was encoded as 73. This numerical dictionary was a vital layer of security. Even if a message were intercepted, it would appear as nothing more than a meaningless jumble of digits to the uninitiated. Only someone possessing the corresponding codebook, a select few, including Washington and Tallmadge, could decipher its true meaning. But the spies' ingenuity did not stop there. They employed a technology that seemed to border on the magical, invisible ink. Washington, an avid student of espionage, had learned of a sympathetic stain, a chemical compound that could be used to write invisibly between the lines of an ordinary letter. The secret writing would only become visible when a second chemical, the reagent, was brushed over the paper. This method was a game-changer. A seemingly innocent business letter or a page from a book could carry a wealth of intelligence, completely hidden from prying eyes. Washington personally instructed Tallmadge on its use, advising that messages be written on the blank leaves of a pamphlet, a common pocketbook, or on the like, as these were less likely to be scrutinized by British patrols than a formal letter. The journey of a single piece of intelligence from the streets of New York to Washington's headquarters was a perilous odyssey, a multi-stage relay race where the baton was a secret that could cost men their lives. It began with Robert Townsend, Samuel Culper, Jr., moving through the city like a ghost in plain sight. He would gather information, troop movements, naval preparations, whispers of British strategy, and commit it to memory. Returning to his lodgings, he would meticulously draft his report, using both the numerical code and the invisible ink, embedding the vital intelligence within the pages of a seemingly innocuous document. Next, the message had to leave the city, a fortress under constant British surveillance. This was Austin Rowe's role. The jovial tavern keeper would make his regular 55-mile ride from Setauket to New York, ostensibly to purchase supplies. He would meet Townsend, receive the hidden message, and then begin the long, dangerous journey back to Long Island. Every mile was fraught with peril. British patrols were a constant threat, and any traveler was subject to search. Rowe's cover as a merchant was his shield, his affable demeanor a mask for the tension that must have gripped him on every ride. Once back in Setauket, Rowe would deliver the message to a prearranged dead drop, a secret hiding place on Abraham Woodhull's farm. A hollowed-out tree, a loose stone in a wall, any location that was both accessible and inconspicuous. Woodhull, Samuel Culper, Sr., would then retrieve the message. It was now his responsibility to signal the next link in the chain. This is where Anna Strong's clothesline came into play. From her nearby farm, she would hang her laundry in a specific arrangement, a silent broadcast across the fields. The black petticoat was the key, its presence meant a message was waiting. The number of handkerchiefs beside it told Caleb Brewster, the whaleboatman, which of the many coves along the coastline to approach. It was a system of beautiful simplicity, a domestic chore transformed into a vital act of war. Brewster, seeing the signal from his vantage point on the water, would navigate his boat under the cover of darkness to the designated cove. He would find the hidden message, and then begin the most treacherous part of the journey, the crossing of the Long Island Sound. This stretch of water was heavily patrolled by the Royal Navy. Every trip was a gamble, a high-stakes game of cat and mouse with British warships. Brewster, with his intimate knowledge of the currents and coastlines, was a master of this game, his small whaleboat a phantom slipping through the enemy's grasp. Upon reaching the Connecticut shore, Brewster would hand the message off to Tallmadge, who was often waiting with a detachment of his dragoons. Tallmadge would apply the reagent to reveal the invisible ink, decode the numerical substitutions, and finally, dispatch a trusted courier to deliver the intelligence to General Washington. The entire process, from Townsend's pen to Washington's hand, was a testament to the ring's discipline, ingenuity, and unwavering courage. It was a secret railroad, running on a schedule of risk and fueled by the quiet determination of its conductors. Each successful delivery was a small victory in the silent war, a blow struck against the British Empire from the shadows. The intricate system of the Culper ring was born from a harsh lesson, a baptism by fire that underscored the brutal realities of espionage. Before the Culper ring, there was Nathan Hale. His story, though brief and tragic, became a foundational cautionary tale for the nascent American intelligence efforts, a stark reminder of the price of amateurism in a professional's game. Hale was a captain in the Continental Army, a young Yale graduate like Tallmadge, filled with a fervent, almost romantic patriotism. In September 1776, with the American army in disarray after their defeat on Long Island, Washington desperately needed intelligence on British troop positions and intentions in New York. He asked for a volunteer to go behind enemy lines. Hale, without hesitation, stepped forward. Disguising himself as a Dutch schoolmaster, he crossed into enemy territory. But Hale was a soldier, not a spy. His disguise was thin, his methods unrefined. He carried his Yale diploma with him, a credential that instantly marked him as a man of education and, therefore, a potential officer. He spoke too openly, his questions too pointed. It didn't take long for him to be discovered. Some accounts say he was recognized and betrayed by his own cousin, a staunch loyalist. Whatever the specifics, he was captured by the British, and the incriminating maps and notes found on his person sealed his fate. There was no trial, no ceremony. Under the martial law of the time, the sentence for spying was absolute and immediate, death by hanging. On the morning of September 22, 1776, Nathan Hale was led to the gallows. He was denied a Bible, and a letter he wrote to his family was torn up in front of him. But he was not denied his final words. A British officer present at the execution was so moved by Hale's composure and dignity that he later recounted the young captain's last declaration. As he stood on the precipice of eternity, Nathan Hale uttered the words that would echo through American history, a testament to his unwavering devotion. "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." Hale's death was a profound shock to the Continental Army. It was a brutal awakening to the fact that courage and patriotism alone were not enough to win this secret war. Espionage was a craft, a deadly art that required discipline, training, and a level of cunning that Hale, for all his bravery, did not possess. His sacrifice, however, was not in vain. It was the seed from which the Culper ring would grow. Benjamin Tallmadge, who had been Hale's classmate at Yale, took the lesson to heart. He would build his network on a foundation of absolute secrecy, of meticulous tradecraft, of a system so robust that it could withstand the constant pressure of the enemy. The memory of Nathan Hale would serve as a constant, solemn reminder of the stakes they were playing for. While the Culper Ring was Washington's most organized and systematic intelligence network, the spirit of resistance manifested in countless other acts of individual bravery, often by those whom society least expected. The silent warriors were not confined to a single ring, they were a constellation of patriots, their lights shining in the darkest corners of the British occupation. One of the most remarkable of these was Lydia Darragh, a Quaker woman in Philadelphia whose quiet faith belied a will of iron. In the autumn of 1777, Philadelphia, the revolutionary capital, fell to the British. General William Howe established his headquarters in the city, and his officers sought lodging in the homes of the local populace. The Darragh family, being Quakers and therefore officially neutral, were deemed suitable hosts. A spacious upstairs room in their home was commandeered by high-ranking British officers for their secret meetings. The Darraghs were ordered to remain in their bedrooms during these councils of war. It was an arrangement the British believed would ensure their privacy. They had gravely underestimated the woman of the house. On the evening of December 2, 1777, Lydia Darragh's intuition told her that this was no ordinary meeting. The officers arrived late, their voices low and urgent. She was instructed to have her family in bed early and to be prepared to admit a late-arriving officer. A sense of foreboding settled upon her. Feigning sleep, she instead crept from her room and pressed her ear to the keyhole of the meeting room. What she heard made her blood run cold. The British were planning a massive surprise attack on Washington's army, then encamped at Whitemarsh, just a few miles outside the city. The plan was to march out under the cover of darkness on December 4 and crush the Continental Army in a decisive blow. Lydia knew she had to act. The fate of the revolution could rest on her shoulders. But how could a lone woman, a Quaker in an occupied city, get a message to Washington? The next day, she devised a plan of remarkable courage and ingenuity. She told the British authorities that she needed to go to the Frankford Mill, just outside the city, to procure flour. It was a plausible request, a domestic errand that would not arouse suspicion. She was granted a pass to cross the British lines. Her journey was a nerve-wracking ordeal. After securing the flour, she pressed on, walking for miles through the cold December air, her heart pounding with every step. She eventually encountered an American officer, Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Craig, whom she knew. In the quiet solitude of the winter woods, she relayed the information she had overheard, the details of the impending attack. Her mission complete, she turned back and made her way home, the bag of flour her alibi, her quiet demeanor her shield. 2 days later, the British Army marched out of Philadelphia, just as planned. But instead of the sleeping, unsuspecting army they expected to find at Whitemarsh, they were met by a Continental force that was fully alert and entrenched in strong defensive positions. The element of surprise was lost. After a few days of inconclusive skirmishing, a frustrated General Howe marched his army back to Philadelphia, the grand plan a dismal failure. The British knew they had been betrayed. An inquiry was launched, and the Darragh household, as the site of the secret meeting, was a primary focus. An officer questioned Lydia directly, demanding to know if anyone in her family had been awake on the night of the meeting. With a composure that bordered on the sublime, Lydia Darragh looked the officer in the eye and, without flinching, assured him that they had all been fast asleep. Her performance was so convincing, her reputation as a peaceful Quaker so unimpeachable, that she was dismissed as a suspect. She had risked everything, her life, her family, her home, and had emerged from the crucible not only unscathed, but victorious. Lydia Darragh's story is a powerful testament to the fact that in the silent war for independence, the most effective warrior was sometimes a middle-aged woman with a keyhole and the courage to listen. The web of espionage was woven not only by those who could retreat to the relative safety of a Long Island farm but also by those who lived and worked in the very heart of the British stronghold. In the bustling, occupied streets of New York City, Every conversation was a potential source of intelligence, and every interaction a risk. Here, in this lion's den, operated one of the most audacious and effective spies of the Revolution, a gregarious Irish-American tailor named Hercules Mulligan. Mulligan was a man of contradictions. A founding member of the Sons of Liberty and a passionate advocate for independence, he was also a popular and successful haberdasher whose clients included some of the most senior officers in the British Army. His shop was a nexus of information, a place where loyalist and patriot sympathies were draped over the same mannequins. British officers, in need of a new uniform or a quick repair, would frequent his establishment, and in the casual atmosphere of the tailor's shop, their tongues would often loosen. Mulligan, with his affable demeanor and keen ear, was a master at turning idle chatter into actionable intelligence. He learned of troop movements by the sudden rush for repaired coats. He gleaned details of supply shortages from complaints about the quality of available fabric. He overheard whispers of upcoming campaigns while measuring an officer for a new dress uniform. Mulligan's genius was his ability to be simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, a friendly face who was privy to the inner workings of the British military machine simply by doing his job. He was a spy hidden in the most audacious of places, in plain sight. But Mulligan's operation had another, equally crucial component, his enslaved man, Cato. While Mulligan gathered the intelligence, it was Cato who bore the immense risk of delivering it. Under the guise of delivering tailored clothing or running errands for his master, Cato could move through the city with a freedom that a white patriot could never hope to achieve. He was, in the eyes of the British, part of the scenery, a servant going about his duties, and therefore, largely invisible. This societal blindness was a tool that Cato and Mulligan exploited with masterful skill. Cato's journeys were fraught with peril. He would carry messages to the designated couriers of the Culper ring, his heart surely pounding with the knowledge of the secret he carried. He was a silent warrior in the truest sense, his name lost to the main currents of history, yet his role was indispensable. The partnership between Mulligan and Cato was a microcosm of the Revolution itself, a collaboration across lines of class and status, a shared struggle for a freedom that would mean very different things for each of them. Mulligan fought for the political liberty of a new nation, while Cato, in his every act of defiance, fought for a personal liberty that was still a distant, almost unimaginable dream. Twice, Mulligan's activities brought him under direct suspicion from the British. Twice, he was arrested and interrogated. And twice, his impeccable cover and the fierce loyalty of his high-ranking British clients secured his release. They simply could not believe that their charming and reliable tailor could be a rebel spy. Hercules Mulligan, the tailor of New York, continued to snip away at the threads of the British war effort, his needle as potent a weapon as any sword. As the war dragged on, the theater of conflict shifted south, and with it, the focus of Washington's intelligence needs. In Virginia, as the final, decisive campaign of the war began to take shape, another silent warrior emerged from the shadows of bondage to play a role of staggering importance. His name was James Armistead. Born into slavery in Virginia, Armistead yearned for freedom. When the Marquis de Lafayette, the dashing young French general who had become one of Washington's most trusted commanders, arrived in Virginia to counter the British forces under the command of the traitor Benedict Arnold, Armistead saw his chance. He volunteered his services to the American cause, offering to infiltrate the enemy camp. Lafayette, recognizing the potential of such an asset, agreed. Armistead's plan was one of audacious simplicity. He would pose as a runaway slave, seeking refuge and work with the British. The British, who often used escaped slaves as laborers and guides, readily accepted him. He was first placed in the camp of Benedict Arnold, where his diligence and intelligence quickly earned him a measure of trust. He moved about the camp, absorbing every detail, the number of troops, the state of their supplies, the morale of the soldiers. He would then feed this information to American agents. When Lord Cornwallis arrived to take command of the British forces in Virginia, Armistead's role became even more critical. he managed to get himself assigned as a servant in Cornwallis's own headquarters. This was the inner sanctum of the British war effort in the South. Armistead served officers at their dinners, he listened to their conversations, he even, by some accounts, had access to Cornwallis's private papers. He was a ghost in the machine, a silent witness to the most secret plans of the enemy. Then, in a move of breathtaking audacity, Armistead became a double agent. Cornwallis, impressed by Armistead's apparent loyalty and his knowledge of the local terrain, asked him to spy on the Americans. Armistead readily agreed. He would travel to Lafayette's camp, ostensibly to gather intelligence for the British, but in reality, to deliver his own reports to the French general. He would then return to Cornwallis with carefully crafted pieces of misinformation supplied by Lafayette, false intelligence designed to mislead the British about American troop strength and intentions. He was playing a dangerous game, walking a tightrope between two armies, where a single misstep would mean certain death. The intelligence that Armistead provided was invaluable. As the American and French forces began to converge on the Virginia Peninsula, preparing to trap Cornwallis at Yorktown, Armistead delivered the most critical report of all. He provided Lafayette with precise details of the British defensive positions, their naval support, and their plans to counter the impending siege. This information allowed Washington and his French allies to tailor their attack with devastating precision. The siege of Yorktown was the climax of the American Revolution. The combined forces of the Continental Army and the French fleet cornered Cornwallis, cutting off his supplies and his escape. On October 19, 1781, the British Army surrendered. The war was effectively over. As Lord Cornwallis formally surrendered, he is said to have seen James Armistead standing at Lafayette's side. The British general, realizing the depth of the deception, could only mutter, "Ah, you rogue, then you have been playing me a trick all this time." James Armistead's story is one of the most remarkable of the entire war. An enslaved man, with no formal education, had outwitted the highest echelons of the British military. He had risked his life not once, but on a daily basis, for a cause that, at the time, offered him no guarantee of his own freedom. After the war, his status as a spy initially prevented him from being emancipated along with other enslaved people who had served as soldiers. It was only after the Marquis de Lafayette personally wrote a testimonial on his behalf that the Virginia General Assembly granted him his freedom. In gratitude, James Armistead adopted a new surname, Lafayette. His story, like that of Cato and countless other unnamed African Americans, is a powerful and often overlooked chapter in the story of the Revolution. They were the silent warriors who fought not only for a new nation, but for the very definition of what it meant to be free. They navigated a world of profound injustice and inequality to strike a blow for liberty, their courage a testament to the indomitable spirit of a people who refused to be defined by their chains. The life of a spy is a life lived in the shadows, a constant negotiation between two realities, two identities. For Abraham Woodhull, the reluctant farmer-turned-spymaster, this duality was a heavy burden. He was a man of the earth, his life governed by the predictable cycles of the seasons, the planting and the harvest. The world of espionage, with its deceptions, its coded language, its constant, gnawing fear, was an alien landscape to him. Every day was a performance, every interaction a potential trap. His farm in Sedaket, once a place of peace and solitude, became the epicenter of his secret life, a stage for his clandestine activities. The familiar rustle of the wind in the trees could be the approach of a British patrol. The friendly greeting of a neighbor could be a veiled accusation. Woodhull became a student of human nature, his senses honed to a razor's edge. He learned to read the subtle shifts in a person's gaze, the slight hesitation in their voice, the unspoken questions that hung in the air. He lived in a state of perpetual vigilance, his mind a fortress against the outside world. The dead drops, the secret hiding places on his farm, were a source of constant anxiety. A hollow tree, a loose stone in a wall, these were the mailboxes of the Revolution, the places where he would leave his reports for Austin Row and retrieve the messages from Robert Townsend. Every trip to a dead drop was a journey into enemy territory, even though it was on his own land. He would move under the cover of darkness, his heart pounding in his chest, his ears straining for any sound that was out of place. The simple act of retrieving a letter was transformed into a life-or-death mission. His relationship with his family and his community became a complex tapestry of love and deception. He could not share his secret with anyone, not even his closest loved ones. The burden of his knowledge was his alone to bear. He was surrounded by people, yet he was utterly alone. This isolation was perhaps the heaviest cross to bear. He was a man living a lie, a patriot masquerading as a loyal subject of the crown. The strain of this constant performance was immense, a psychological toll that is difficult to comprehend. There were moments of sheer terror, close calls that left him shaken to his core. On one occasion, he was arrested by a British officer, a notoriously brutal man named Colonel John Graves Simcoe. Woodhull was taken to a local church, which had been converted into a makeshift prison and barracks. He was interrogated, his loyalty questioned, his every word scrutinized. It was in this moment, facing the very real possibility of the gallows, that Woodhull's quiet strength came to the fore. He maintained his composure, his answers calm and measured. He was, he insisted, a simple farmer, loyal to the king, with no interest in the politics of the rebellion. His performance was so convincing that he was eventually released. But the experience left an indelible mark on him. The fear of discovery was no longer an abstract concept, it was a visceral, terrifying reality. The story of the Culper ring is not just a story of clever codes and daring couriers, it is a story of profound human endurance. It is the story of Abraham Woodhull, the quiet farmer who conquered his own fear to serve his country. It is the story of Robert Townsend, the principled Quaker who reconciled his faith with his duty. It is the story of Anna Strong, the resourceful homemaker who turned her domestic chores into acts of defiance. And it is the story of countless others, the silent warriors who risked everything for a cause they believed in, their names lost to history, but their legacy woven into the very fabric of the nation they helped to create. This was the human cost of the secret war, the unseen battles that were fought not on the fields of glory, but in the quiet chambers of the human heart. The members of the Culper ring were not soldiers in the traditional sense, but their courage was no less profound, their sacrifices no less significant. They were the invisible architects of American victory, the silent guardians of a revolution that could have easily been lost. Their story is a powerful reminder that the course of history is often shaped not by the clash of armies, but by the quiet courage of individuals who are willing to stand up for what is right, even when they are standing alone in the dark. As the war progressed, the stakes of this secret conflict grew ever higher, culminating in the most infamous act of betrayal in American history, the treason of Benedict Arnold. The story of Arnold's fall from grace and the role of the Culper ring in his exposure is a dramatic saga of ambition, greed, and the corrosive power of a wounded ego. It is a story that brings into sharp focus the shadowy world of espionage and the very real consequences of a single man's treachery. Benedict Arnold was, by all accounts, one of the most brilliant and audacious field commanders in the Continental Army. His daring leadership at the Battle of Saratoga was instrumental in securing the American victory that convinced France to enter the war as an American ally. He was a hero, a man of action, and he knew it. But Arnold was also a man of immense pride and a burning ambition that was constantly being thwarted. He felt that his contributions were not fully appreciated, that he was being passed over for promotion in favor of lesser men. He had a lavish lifestyle that he could not afford, and he was constantly in debt. These grievances festered, creating a fertile ground for the seeds of treason. In 1779, while serving as the military governor of Philadelphia, Arnold began to make secret overtures to the British. He offered his services to the enemy, for a price. His initial contacts were with Major John André, the charming and intelligent head of British intelligence in New York. André, who had been a key figure in the British war effort, saw in Arnold an opportunity of immense strategic value. The two men began a clandestine correspondence, their letters filled with coded language and veiled promises. Arnold's price was high, £20,000, a sum equivalent to millions of dollars today. And for that price, he would deliver a prize of incalculable value, the American fortress at West Point. West Point was the key to the Hudson River, a vital artery of communication and supply for the Continental Army. Its loss would have been a devastating blow, potentially splitting the colonies in two and crippling the American war effort. Washington himself called it the most important post in America. In the summer of 1780, Arnold, through a series of calculated political maneuvers, managed to secure command of West Point. The stage was now set for his ultimate betrayal. All that remained was to finalize the details of the handover with the British. For this, a personal meeting between Arnold and André was required. It was at this critical juncture that the threads of Arnold's conspiracy began to intersect with the web of the Culper ring. Robert Townsend, from his listening post in New York City, began to hear whispers of a high-level American officer who was in communication with the British. The rumors were vague, but deeply troubling. Townsend, using his invisible ink and numerical code, relayed this information to Tallmadge. The message was a bombshell: "He is a man of consequence, and I have no doubt but that he is a traitor." Washington, upon receiving this intelligence, was deeply concerned. But without a name, there was little he could do. The identity of the traitor remained a mystery. The clock was ticking. In late September 1780, Major John André sailed up the Hudson River on the British sloop of war, the Vulture. Under the cover of darkness, he was rowed ashore to meet with Benedict Arnold. The two men spent the night in a house near the river, finalizing the plans for the surrender of West Point. Arnold gave André a set of documents, including a map of the fortress and details of its defenses, to carry back to the British High Command. He also gave him a pass, signed by Arnold himself, that would allow André to travel through American lines. But the plan began to unravel. The Vulture was fired upon by American batteries and forced to retreat down the river, leaving André stranded behind enemy lines. He was now faced with a perilous overland journey back to New York. He made a fateful decision: he would travel in civilian clothes, a direct violation of the rules of war. A spy captured in uniform was treated as a prisoner of war. A spy captured in civilian clothes was subject to execution. As André made his way south, he was stopped near Tarrytown by 3 American militiamen, John Paulding, Isaac Van Wart, and David Williams. They were part of a local patrol, on the lookout for Loyalist raiders. They questioned André, who, in a moment of confusion, first identified himself as a British officer, and then, realizing his mistake, tried to use the pass from Arnold. The militiamen were suspicious. They searched him, and in his stocking, they found the incriminating papers from Arnold. The capture of Major John André was a stroke of luck, a chance encounter that would change the course of the war. The militiamen, not fully understanding the significance of the documents they had found, took their prisoner to the nearest American commander. The news of André's capture, and the evidence of Arnold's treason, spread like wildfire. When Washington learned of the betrayal, he was stunned and heartbroken. Arnold had been his protégé, a man he had trusted and supported. The depth of the deception was almost incomprehensible. "Whom can we trust now?" he is said to have lamented. Arnold, learning of André's capture, made a hasty escape. He fled to the Vulture and was taken to New York, where he was given a commission in the British Army. He would go on to lead British troops against his former countrymen, his name forever a synonym for traitor. Major John André's fate was sealed. He was a spy, captured behind enemy lines in civilian clothes, with incriminating documents in his possession. A military tribunal was convened, and the verdict was swift and unanimous: death by hanging. André, a man of honor and courage, faced his end with a dignity that impressed even his captors. His only request was that he be shot by a firing squad, a soldier's death, rather than hanged like a common criminal. Washington, in a rare display of inflexibility, denied the request. The rules of war were clear, and the precedent of Nathan Hale's execution was still a fresh wound. On October 2, 1780, Major John André was hanged. The exposure of Benedict Arnold's treason was a pivotal moment in the American Revolution. It was a victory for the silent warriors of the Culper ring, whose timely intelligence had put Washington on high alert. It was a testament to the vigilance of 3 ordinary militiamen, whose chance encounter had averted a military disaster. And it was a stark reminder of the fragility of trust and the corrosive power of ambition in a time of war. The secret war had once again burst into the open, revealing the hidden currents of loyalty and betrayal that ran beneath the surface of the Revolution. The city of New York, in the years of the British occupation, was a world unto itself, a crucible where the ideals of the Revolution were tested against the harsh realities of military rule. It was a city of stark contrasts, of opulent wealth and abject poverty, of fervent loyalty to the crown and simmering rebellion. For the silent warriors of the Culper ring, it was the belly of the beast, a labyrinth of cobblestone streets and shadowed alleys where every face was a potential enemy and every word a potential betrayal. When the British seized the city in 1776, they transformed it into the nerve center of their war effort in North America. The harbor, one of the finest in the world, bristled with the masts of the Royal Navy, a constant and intimidating display of British maritime power. The city's finest homes were commandeered by British officers, their grand ballrooms echoing with the sounds of loyalist celebrations, the clinking of glasses a toast to the king's health. The streets teemed with red-coated soldiers, their disciplined patrols a constant reminder of who was in control. New York was a city under siege, not from without, but from within. The Great Fire of 1776, which broke out shortly after the British occupation began, had left a third of the city in ruins. This charred and desolate landscape, known as the Canvas Town, became a makeshift home for thousands of displaced citizens, loyalist refugees, and the desperate poor. They lived in squalid tents and shanties, a stark and constant reminder of the human cost of the war. The contrast between the squalor of the Canvas Town and the opulence of the British headquarters was a daily affront to the sensibilities of a people who had once dreamed of a society built on equality and justice. For the patriots who remained in the city, life was a precarious balancing act. They were a minority in a city that had become a loyalist stronghold. To openly express sympathy for the revolution was to invite arrest, imprisonment, or worse. They learned to speak in whispers, to guard their thoughts, to wear a mask of neutrality or even feigned loyalty. Their children played in the streets alongside the children of British soldiers, a strange and unsettling tableau of a world turned upside down. The prisons of New York were a testament to the brutality of the occupation. The Sugar House, a massive stone building that had once been a sugar refinery, was converted into a prison for American soldiers and suspected patriots. It was a place of unimaginable suffering, of disease, starvation, and despair. The prison ships, anchored in the harbor, were even worse. Thousands of American prisoners were crammed into the dark, airless holds of these floating dungeons, their bodies ravaged by smallpox and dysentery. The stories that trickled out of these places of horror served as a chilling reminder of the consequences of capture. It was in this environment of fear and suspicion that Robert Townsend, the quiet Quaker merchant, operated. His coffee shop was a microcosm of the occupied city, a place where British officers, loyalist merchants, and the occasional, disguised patriot would gather to discuss the news of the day. Townsend, with his calm demeanor and his attentive ear, moved among them, a silent observer in the midst of the storm. He served them coffee, he listened to their boasts and their complaints, he pieced together the fragments of information that would become the lifeblood of the Culper ring. His work as a society journalist gave him access to the upper echelons of the loyalist elite. He attended their parties, he chronicled their social events, he became a familiar and trusted figure in their world. He was playing a long and dangerous game, a game of deception that required a level of self-control that is difficult to imagine. Every smile was a lie, every polite conversation a carefully calculated move in the great chess match of espionage. The psychological toll of this double life was immense. Townsend was a man of peace, a man whose faith taught him to be honest and forthright in his dealings with others. Yet, he was living a life that was a complete negation of those values. He was a spy, a purveyor of secrets, a man who was betraying the trust of those who considered him a friend. This internal conflict, this war within himself, was as real and as challenging as the war that was raging around him. He was constantly aware of the danger he was in. The British were not fools. They knew that there were spies in the city, and they had their own network of counterintelligence agents, led by the formidable Major André. The city was a web of intrigue, a place where everyone was watching everyone else. A single misstep, a single careless word, could lead to his discovery. The thought of the sugar house, of the prison ships, was a constant and terrifying presence in the back of his mind. Yet, Townsend persisted. He was driven by a deep and abiding belief in the cause of American independence, a belief that was strong enough to overcome his fear and his moral qualms. He was a silent warrior, fighting his battles not with a sword, but with a pen, his courage measured not in acts of physical bravery, but in the quiet, daily act of living a lie for the sake of a greater truth. The story of Robert Townsend and the occupied city of New York is a powerful reminder that the American Revolution was not just a war between armies, it was a war of ideas, a struggle for the hearts and minds of a people. It was a war that was fought in the drawing rooms and coffee houses, in the marketplaces and the printing presses, in the quiet conversations and the secret letters of a city that had become the unwilling stage for a great historical drama. And in the midst of this drama, the silent warriors of the Culper ring played their part, their quiet courage a beacon of hope in a city that was shrouded in the darkness of occupation. The secret war for independence was not exclusively a man's domain. While the names of Tallmadge, Woodhull, and Townsend formed the traditional core of the Culper ring's history, the network was sustained and enabled by a host of other individuals, many of them women, whose contributions were just as vital and whose courage was just as profound. These women were the unsung heroines of the revolution, warriors who wielded the weapons of societal expectation and gender stereotypes with the skill of a seasoned general. They were dismissed, overlooked, and underestimated, and in this invisibility, they found their greatest strength. Anna Strong's clothesline code is the most famous example of this feminine ingenuity, but she was far from alone. The theater of war extended into every home, every kitchen, every marketplace, and women were uniquely positioned to observe and to listen. They moved through the occupied territories with a freedom that men of military age did not possess, their presence often explained by domestic duties that rendered them inconspicuous to the British authorities. A woman traveling to visit a sick relative, to purchase thread, or to sell eggs from her farm was a common sight, a part of the everyday fabric of life that was easily ignored. It was a perfect cover. Consider the story of the mysterious Agent 355, a designation found in the Culper ring's correspondence that has intrigued historians for centuries. The code Tallmadge created used numbers to refer to his agents, and the number 355, according to the code's key, simply meant lady. This anonymous woman was one of Townsend's key contacts in New York, a figure of some social standing who was, according to one of Woodhull's letters, one of our dear friends. Her position within Loyalist society gave her access to high-ranking British officers, and she was reportedly able to gather intelligence that was unavailable to anyone else. Some historians speculate that she may have even been close to Major John André himself, and that her intelligence was instrumental in exposing Benedict Arnold's treason. Her true identity remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of the Revolution, a testament to the success of the Culper ring's security and a symbol of the many women whose contributions to the cause of liberty were destined to remain forever in the shadows. Beyond the confines of the Culper ring, other women were waging their own private wars of intelligence. In Philadelphia, after Lydia Darragh's heroic act of eavesdropping, the British became more cautious, but the flow of information did not stop. Women formed informal networks, passing along news and observations through seemingly innocent channels. A recipe exchanged between neighbors could contain a coded message. A piece of gossip shared at the market could hold a vital clue about troop movements. These women were the pioneers of grassroots intelligence, their collective efforts a constant thorn in the side of the British occupation. One of the most audacious female spies of the war was a woman who actually worked for the British, and Bates. A schoolteacher from Philadelphia, Bates was a staunch loyalist. When her husband enlisted in the British Army, she followed him to New York and offered her own services to the cause. Posing as a peddler, she traveled throughout the American camps, selling her wares and keeping her eyes and ears open. She was a master of disguise and deception, able to alter her accent and her appearance to fit any situation. She would count the number of cannons, estimate the number of troops, and assess the state of their supplies, all while haggling over the price of a spool of thread. She would then return to New York and provide detailed reports to her British handlers. Her intelligence was so accurate and so valuable that she was praised by General Henry Clinton himself. And Bates's story is a crucial reminder that the secret war was a complex and multifaceted conflict, with brave and resourceful individuals fighting on both sides. These women, whether patriot or loyalist, were operating in a world that was defined by strict gender roles. They were expected to be wives, mothers, and homemakers, their lives confined to the domestic sphere. But the war shattered these conventions. It thrust women into new roles, new responsibilities, and new dangers. They ran farms and businesses while their husbands were away at war. They faced the threat of invading armies, the scarcity of food, and the constant anxiety of an uncertain future. And in the midst of this chaos, some of them found a way to fight back, to claim a stake in the great struggle that was shaping their world. They turned the very tools of their supposed weakness into weapons. Their perceived frailty made them seem harmless. Their domestic roles gave them a plausible reason to be in places where they could gather information. Their status as non-combatants allowed them to cross enemy lines with a degree of ease that was denied to men. They were the invisible army of the revolution, their battlefield the home, their weapon the secret, their courage a quiet and unyielding force. The story of these women is more than just a footnote to the history of the American Revolution. It is a fundamental rereading of the conflict, a recognition that the war was won not just on the battlefield, but in the kitchens, the drawing rooms, and the marketplaces of a nation in the throes of birth. It is a testament to the fact that the spirit of revolution is not confined to any gender, class, or race. It is a universal human yearning for freedom, a yearning that can turn a farmer into a spy master, a tailor into an intelligence agent, and a woman hanging her laundry into a silent warrior. The anatomy of a secret. To truly comprehend the achievement of the Culper ring, one must dissect the life cycle of a single secret, to follow its perilous journey from a whispered word in a smoke-filled tavern to a strategic directive in the hands of General Washington. It was a journey fraught with 1,000 potential points of failure, a relay race against time and discovery, where the runners were ordinary people engaged in an extraordinary and deadly game. Let us trace the path of one such secret, a piece of intelligence that, while perhaps not as dramatic as the exposure of a traitor, was the bread and butter of the silent war, a report on the movement of British ships. The secret is born on a damp Tuesday evening in Lower Manhattan, in the warm, noisy confines of a coffee-house frequented by officers of the Royal Navy. Robert Townsend, known to the patrons as a mild-mannered merchant and aspiring journalist, sits at a small table, nursing a cup of coffee, his notebook open before him. He is ostensibly writing a piece for the local gazette on the city's burgeoning commerce, a topic of great interest to his loyalist readers. But his true purpose is to listen. His ears are his nets, cast into the sea of conversation that swirls around him, and he is fishing for whispers of war. Two naval officers, their uniforms immaculate, their faces flushed with rum, sit at a nearby table. They speak of home, of the dreary colonial weather, and then, their voices dropping slightly, of their upcoming orders. One complains about the short notice. To be ready to sail by Friday's tide, he grumbles, and with half the provisions we were promised. A quick jaunt to the east, they say. A show of force off the coast of Rhode Island. Townsend's heart gives a slight, almost imperceptible leap. This is it. This is the kind of information that Washington needs. A potential naval movement against the French fleet, which is based in Rhode Island. He does not react. His face remains a mask of placid concentration on his writing. He makes a note in his journal, something about the price of molasses, a meaningless phrase to anyone but himself. But the details are seared into his memory. Friday's tide, a squadron heading east, a show of force, Rhode Island. He finishes his coffee, pays his bill with a polite nod to the proprietor, and steps out into the damp night air, the secret a burning coal in his mind. He returns to his lodgings, the weight of his knowledge a heavy cloak. He is no longer just a merchant, he is a spy, a man whose actions could lead to the deaths of hundreds, or the salvation of a fleet. He sits at his desk, the city's sounds muffled by the night, and begins the delicate process of enciphering his report. He consults his codebook, the small, precious volume that is his most dangerous possession. Friday becomes a number. Rhode Island becomes another. Show of force is translated into a prearranged phrase. He then takes out his sympathetic stain, the invisible ink, and between the lines of a business order for textiles, he carefully pens the secret message. The document, once completed, looks utterly mundane, a piece of everyday commerce. But hidden within it is the key to a potential naval engagement. The next morning, Austin Rowe arrives in the city, his wagon laden with produce from the farms of Long Island. He makes his rounds, selling his goods, his face a picture of rustic innocence. His final stop is Townsend's shop. The two men exchange pleasantries, they discuss the price of eggs and the quality of the recent harvest. It is a perfectly normal conversation, a performance for the benefit of any watching eyes. As Rowe prepares to leave, Townsend hands him a small bundle of goods, including the business order for textiles. For my cousin in Setauket, he says with a smile. She has a fondness for this particular weave. Rowe takes the bundle, his hand steady, his expression unchanged. The first exchange is complete. Now begins the most dangerous leg of the journey. Austin Rowe's 55-mile ride back to Setauket is a gauntlet of British patrols and Loyalist sympathizers. Every mile is a risk. As he guides his wagon along the rutted roads, his mind is a whirlwind of calculation and fear. He has a plausible story, he is a known tradesman, but the secret he carries is a volatile explosive. Around midday, he is stopped by a patrol of British dragoons. The officer in charge is bored and officious. He questions Rowe, his eyes scanning the contents of the wagon. "Where are you coming from, farmer?" "From the city, sir." "Selling my goods." "And where are you headed?" "Home." "To Setauket." The officer dismounts and begins to poke through the items in the wagon. He picks up a bolt of cloth, he examines a sack of potatoes. Rowe's heart is a drum against his ribs, but his face remains calm, his posture relaxed. The officer then spies the bundle of goods for Townsend's cousin. He picks up the folded business order. "And what is this?" "A textile order, sir. For a relative of Mr. Townsend, the merchant." The officer unfolds the paper. He sees the columns of figures, the descriptions of fabrics, the mundane language of commerce. He is not trained to look for invisible ink. He sees nothing out of the ordinary. With a grunt of disinterest, he tosses the paper back into the wagon. "Move along," he says, his attention already drifting to the next traveler. Rowe gives a respectful nod, clicks the reins, and the wagon rolls on. He has passed through the fire, his secret intact. He arrives in Setauket after dark, exhausted but relieved. He does not go directly to Woodhull's farm. Instead, he proceeds to the prearranged dead drop, a hollow in an old oak tree on the edge of Woodhull's property. He places the folded paper inside, and then, his part in the drama complete, he returns to his tavern, to the familiar world of clanking mugs and easy conversation, the secret now passed to the next actor in the play. Abraham Woodhull has been waiting. He has seen Rose's wagon pass by, and he knows that the message has arrived. But he must be patient. He waits until the dead of night, until the world is asleep, before he ventures out. The short walk from his farmhouse to the old oak tree is a journey of 1,000 miles. Every shadow is a potential enemy, every rustle of leaves a potential discovery. He retrieves the paper, his fingers trembling slightly, and returns to the safety of his home. The secret is now his to guard. The next morning, a black petticoat appears on Anna Strong's clothesline, a dark flag against the morning sky. It is a signal, a silent broadcast across the water to Caleb Brewster, who is waiting in his whaleboat, hidden in a secluded cove on the Connecticut shore. He sees the signal through his spyglass, and he knows that it is time to move. He waits for the tide and the cover of darkness, and then he begins his journey across the Sound. He navigates the treacherous waters with the skill of a man who was born to the sea. He avoids the British patrols, his small boat a phantom in the night. He lands in the designated cove, finds the message left for him by Woodhull, and then turns back, the secret now in his possession. The final leg of the journey has begun. He delivers the message to Benjamin Tallmadge, who is waiting with his dragoons. Tallmadge, with a steady hand, applies the reagent, and the invisible words spring to life. He deciphers the code, and the full import of the message becomes clear. A British squadron is preparing to sail for Rhode Island. The French are in danger. A courier is immediately dispatched, riding through the night to Washington's headquarters. The general, upon receiving the intelligence, acts swiftly. He orders a portion of his own army to make a feint, a conspicuous movement towards New York City. The ruse works. The British, believing that New York is under threat, cancel the expedition to Rhode Island. The French fleet is safe. A single secret, born in a coffeehouse, has traveled through the hands of a merchant, a tavern keeper, a farmer, a housewife, and a whaleboatman, to alter the course of the war. It is a journey that has been fraught with danger, a testament to the courage and ingenuity of the silent warriors. And it is a journey that will be repeated, time and time again, in the long and arduous struggle for American independence. The Shadow Catchers, British counterintelligence. The Silent War was not a one-sided affair. For every Patriot spy operating in the shadows, there was a British agent hunting them, a shadow catcher whose task was to preserve the secrets of the Crown and dismantle the clandestine networks of the rebellion. The British intelligence service was a formidable and well-established machine, honed by centuries of European conflict. They were the professionals, the masters of the game, and they viewed the American upstarts with a mixture of contempt and grudging respect. The story of the Culper ring is not complete without understanding the constant, looming threat of the men who were trying to destroy it. At the heart of the British intelligence effort in New York was the figure of Major John André. Before his fateful encounter with Benedict Arnold, André was the chief of British Secret Service, a man of immense charm, talent, and ruthlessness. He was an artist, a poet, and a charismatic society figure, but beneath this polished exterior was a keen and calculating mind. André was the architect of the British spy network, and he was obsessed with uncovering Washington's own. He understood that the war would not be won by brute force alone, it would be won by the side that controlled the flow of information. André's methods were a dark mirror of Tallmadge's. He recruited his own network of loyalist agents, men and women who were motivated by a genuine belief in the royal cause, by the promise of financial reward, or by the fear of reprisal. He established his own system of codes and ciphers, his own network of couriers and dead drops. He was a worthy adversary, and the Silent War was, in many ways, a personal duel between André and the unseen spy masters of the Continental Army. The British had a significant advantage: they controlled the territory. New York was their fortress, and they could monitor the comings and goings of its inhabitants with a level of scrutiny that was impossible for the Americans. They established checkpoints on all the major roads leading out of the city. They patrolled the waterways with a fleet of small, fast ships. They employed a network of informants, paid to report any suspicious activity, any whispered word of rebellion. The city was a cage, and the British were the keepers. One of their most effective counterintelligence tactics was the interception of mail. The post riders of the day were a primary means of communication, and the British made a concerted effort to capture them. Every captured mailbag was a potential intelligence windfall, a window into the plans and intentions of the enemy. The letters were brought to a secret office in New York, where they were carefully opened, their contents transcribed, and then resealed with a forged wax stamp. The recipient would never know that their private correspondence had been read by the enemy. This systematic interception of mail was a constant threat to the Culper ring, and it is why they went to such extraordinary lengths to avoid the official postal routes, relying instead on their own private couriers like Austin Roe. The British also employed agents provocateurs, spies who would pose as patriots to infiltrate rebel networks. These agents would feign a passionate commitment to the cause of independence, hoping to gain the trust of genuine patriots and learn the identities of their leaders. It was a dirty and dangerous business, a world of deception and betrayal where the lines between friend and foe were constantly blurred. One of the most notorious of these British counter-spies was a man named James Moody, a New Jersey farmer who became one of Washington's most persistent and troublesome adversaries. Moody was a zealous loyalist who led a small, guerrilla-style band of partisans. He specialized in raids and ambushes, but his most valuable contribution to the British cause was his work as an intelligence agent. He was a master of disguise, and he had a knack for turning American agents, for convincing them to betray their own side. He was a constant thorn in the side of the New Jersey militia, and his name was spoken with a mixture of fear and hatred by the patriots of the region. On one occasion, Moody undertook a daring mission to capture the governor of New Jersey, William Livingston. He and his men managed to infiltrate the governor's residence, but Livingston was away at the time. Undeterred, Moody made off with a trove of the governor's private papers, a significant intelligence victory. His exploits made him a hero to the Loyalists and a villain to the Patriots. He was the embodiment of the bitter, internecine conflict that was tearing the colonies apart. The constant pressure from British counterintelligence created an atmosphere of intense paranoia. The spies of the Culper ring knew that they were being hunted. They knew that a single mistake could lead to their capture and execution. This fear was a constant companion, a shadow that followed them everywhere. Abraham Woodhull, in his letters to Tallmadge, often wrote of his anxiety, of his fear of being discovered. He was a man who was not built for the world of espionage, and the strain of his double life was immense. He once wrote that he felt as if he were constantly walking on a precipice. It is a testament to the skill of Benjamin Tallmadge and the courage of his agents that the Culper ring was able to operate for 5 years without a single one of its core members being unmasked. They were able to stay one step ahead of André and his shadow catchers, to navigate the treacherous waters of the silent war with a combination of ingenuity, discipline, and sheer luck. They were the amateurs who outwitted the professionals, the farmers and merchants who beat the masters at their own game. The story of British counterintelligence is a crucial part of the narrative of the Silent War. It provides the context for the risks that the Culper ring faced, the constant danger that was the backdrop to their every action. It transforms the story from a simple tale of patriotic heroism into a complex and thrilling cat-and-mouse game, a duel fought in the shadows between two determined and resourceful adversaries. And it makes the ultimate success of the Culper ring all the more remarkable, a victory not just for the cause of independence, but for the quiet courage and unwavering resolve of the ordinary people who were its silent warriors. The unseen tracks of liberty. The term Underground Railroad would not enter the American lexicon for another half-century, its name forever linked to the heroic struggle to guide enslaved people to freedom in the North. Yet, The metaphor is a powerful and fitting lens through which to view the secret operations of the American Revolution. The Culper Ring and its associated networks were, in essence, America's first underground railroad, a clandestine transportation system built not to move people, but to move the very idea of liberty itself, in its most fragile and potent form, information. The tracks of this railroad were not made of iron and steel, but of invisible ink and whispered words. They were the secret routes that wound their way through the occupied territory, the lonely country roads traveled by Austin Roe, the treacherous waterways navigated by Caleb Brewster. The stations were not bustling depots, but quiet, unassuming places, a tavern in Setauket, a Quaker's home in Philadelphia, a tailor's shop in the heart of New York City. These were the safe houses of the Revolution, places where a secret could be passed, a courier could find a moment's rest, and the next leg of the journey could be planned. The conductors of this railroad were the silent warriors themselves, the ordinary men and women who risked everything to guide the precious cargo of intelligence to its destination. They were the farmers, the merchants, the housewives, and the enslaved people who, through their quiet acts of courage, kept the wheels of the revolution turning. They were the invisible engine of the war effort, their work unseen and unsung, but utterly essential. And the cargo was the most valuable commodity in the world, truth. In a time of propaganda and misinformation, of rumor and deceit, the intelligence provided by the Culper Ring was a beacon of clarity. It was the truth about British troop movements, the truth about their naval preparations, the truth about their strategic intentions. It was the truth that allowed Washington to anticipate the enemy, to counter their moves, to make the critical decisions that would ultimately lead to victory. Each piece of intelligence was a spark of light in the darkness, a single candle that, when combined with others, illuminated the path to freedom. The parallel to the later Underground Railroad is not merely a romantic notion, it is a profound historical echo. Both were networks of resistance, born from a deep-seated belief in the unalienable rights of humanity. Both were operated by ordinary people who were moved to extraordinary acts of courage by the injustice they saw around them. Both relied on a sophisticated system of codes, signals, and secret routes to evade a powerful and oppressive enemy. And both were a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to resist tyranny, to fight for freedom, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The story of the Revolutionary War's Underground Railroad is a reminder that the struggle for liberty is a continuous thread that runs through American history. The silent warriors of the Culper Ring were the spiritual ancestors of the abolitionists who would later guide enslaved people to freedom. They were the pioneers of a tradition of clandestine resistance, a tradition that would be carried on by future generations of Americans in their own struggles for justice and equality. They laid the unseen tracks of liberty, the secret pathways that would lead to the birth of a new nation and the enduring promise of a more perfect union. As the war drew to a close, the silent warriors of the Culper Ring began to fade back into the fabric of civilian life. The surrender of Cornwallis at Yorktown in 1781 marked the effective end of the conflict, and by 1783, with the signing of the Treaty of Paris, the war was officially over. The British evacuated New York, and the city was once again in American hands. The need for a secret war was over. For the members of the Ring, the return to normalcy was a strange and unsettling experience. They had lived for years in a world of shadows, their lives defined by a secret that they could not share. Now, the secret was no longer necessary, but the habits of a spy were not so easily shed. The sense of constant vigilance, the habit of speaking in veiled terms, the instinct to look over one's shoulder, these were the invisible scars of their service. Abraham Woodhull returned to his farm, to the familiar rhythms of the land. He had been the reluctant spy, the man who had been pushed to the very limits of his courage. He had faced down his fears, and he had emerged victorious. But the experience had changed him. He was no longer the simple farmer he had once been. He had seen the dark underbelly of the world, the capacity of men for both great heroism and great betrayal. He would live out the rest of his days in the quiet obscurity that he had always craved, his secret service to his country a private memory, a story that he would carry with him to his grave. Robert Townsend returned to his business, his role as Samuel Culper, Jr. a secret that he would guard with a fierce and unwavering resolve. He was so successful in his deception that his role in the Culper ring was not discovered until the 20th century, when a historian examining his correspondence finally pieced together the puzzle. Townsend's refusal to seek recognition or reward for his service is a testament to the purity of his motives. He had not spied for fame or for fortune, he had spied for a cause, and with the cause won, he was content to let his contribution remain unknown. Benjamin Tallmadge, the spymaster, was the only member of the ring to achieve public prominence after the war. He was elected to the United States Congress, where he served for 16 years. He was a respected and influential figure in the new nation, his wartime service a matter of public record. But even he rarely spoke of the specifics of the Culper ring, of the secret methods and the hidden identities of his agents. He understood the sanctity of the secrets he had kept, and he honored the trust that his agents had placed in him. And what of the others? Anna Strong, the woman whose clothesline had been a beacon of hope. Caleb Brewster, the daring whaleboatman who had braved the waters of the Sound. Austin Rowe, the steady courier who had ridden the lonely roads of Long Island. They, too, returned to their lives, their extraordinary service a quiet and personal point of pride. They were the living embodiment of the citizen soldier, the ordinary people who had answered the call of history and then returned to the quiet dignity of their everyday lives. The story of the silent warriors is a story that was almost lost to history. It is a story that had to be pieced together from scattered letters, from coded messages, from the faint whispers that survived in local lore. It is a story that reminds us that the most important contributions are often the ones that are made in the shadows, far from the glare of the public eye. They were the invisible architects of a new nation, the secret guardians of a revolution. They were the farmers, the merchants, the tailors, and the housewives who, through their quiet courage and their unwavering resolve, helped to win a war and to forge a new identity. They were the silent warriors, and their legacy is the nation they helped to create, a nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Their story is not just a chapter in the history of the American Revolution, it is a timeless lesson in the power of ordinary people to change the world. It is a reminder that the fight for freedom is never truly over, and that in every generation, there are those who are called to be its silent guardians. They are the ones who are willing to stand up for what is right, even when they are standing alone, in the dark. They are the ones who understand that the quietest whisper of truth can be more powerful than the loudest roar of tyranny. They are the silent warriors, and their spirit lives on in the heart of every American who cherishes the precious gift of liberty. If this story has awakened something in you, if it has resonated with the truth in your own heart, then our journey together has just begun. Subscribe to this channel. Join us as we continue to explore the hidden histories, the forgotten heroes, and the silent struggles that have shaped our world. The past is not a dead thing, it is a living presence, a source of inspiration and a guide for the future. Let us explore it together. The Price of Secrecy. A deeper look into the spy's psyche. The life of a Culper ring agent was a masterclass in psychological endurance. To exist in a state of constant duplicity, to present a facade of normalcy while your very soul was engaged in a high-stakes rebellion, was a burden that few can truly comprehend. The external dangers of capture and execution were terrifyingly real, but the internal war, the slow erosion of the self, was a more insidious and perhaps more damaging foe. For men like Abraham Woodhull and Robert Townsend, the price of their patriotism was paid not just in moments of fear, but in the quiet, daily corrosion of their own identity. Woodhull, the farmer from Setauket, was a man defined by his connection to the land. His life was one of transparency, governed by the honest labor of his hands and the predictable turning of the seasons. The world of espionage was a violent intrusion into this natural order. It forced him to become a creature of the shadows, a man who dealt in whispers and half-truths. His letters to Tallmadge are a poignant chronicle of this internal struggle. He speaks of his low spirits, of his constant anxiety, of the feeling that he is being watched. He is a man at war with himself, his natural inclination towards honesty and openness in direct conflict with the demands of his secret life. Imagine the simple act of a conversation with a neighbor. For the pre-war Woodhull, it was a moment of community, of shared experience. For Samuel Culper, it was a minefield. Was the neighbor's friendly inquiry a genuine expression of concern, or a veiled attempt to probe for information? Was the gossip about the local British garrison an innocent observation, or a test of his loyalty? Every word had to be weighed, every response calculated. He was a man who could no longer afford the luxury of a spontaneous or unguarded moment. His mind was a fortress, and he was its lonely sentinel. The strain was not just psychological, it was physical. Woodhull complained of headaches, of sleepless nights, of a general malaise that seemed to have no physical cause. This was the body keeping score, the physical manifestation of a mind under siege. The constant stress of his double life was literally making him sick. There were times when he wanted to quit, to retreat back into the simple, honest life he had known. But his commitment to the cause, and the steady, reassuring hand of his friend and spymaster, Benjamin Tallmadge, kept him in the game. For Robert Townsend, the conflict was even more profound. As a Quaker, his entire worldview was built on a foundation of pacifism and absolute honesty. The act of spying, of engaging in deception and contributing to a violent conflict, was a direct violation of the core tenets of his faith. He was a man caught between his conscience and his country, his spiritual beliefs and his patriotic duty. This was not a decision he took lightly, and the moral weight of it was a burden he would carry for the rest of his life. His refusal to accept any payment for his services is a testament to this internal struggle. He was not a mercenary, he was a man of principle, trying to navigate an impossible moral landscape. His work as a spy was an act of profound personal sacrifice, a sacrifice not just of his safety, but of his own sense of spiritual integrity. It is perhaps for this reason that he was so adamant that his role remain a secret. To have his deception made public would have been a betrayal of the very principles he held so dear. His silence was his penance. The other members of the ring faced their own unique psychological challenges. Anna Strong, using her domestic chores as a cover, had to project an image of serene domesticity while her heart was pounding with the knowledge of the secret she was helping to convey. Caleb Brewster, the daring whaleboatman, had to contend with the constant, visceral fear of capture on the open water, a fear that was as real as the cold spray of the Sound on his face. Austin Rowe, the affable tavern keeper, had to maintain his cheerful facade while carrying messages that could send him to the gallows. This was the human cost of the silent war, the unseen wounds that were inflicted not by musket balls, but by the constant, grinding pressure of a life lived in the shadows. The members of the Culper ring were not superheroes, they were ordinary people who were asked to do an extraordinary and unnatural thing. They were asked to live a lie, to betray the trust of those around them, to exist in a state of perpetual fear and isolation. That they were able to do so for 5 years, without breaking, without being discovered, is a testament not just to their courage, but to their profound psychological resilience. They were the silent warriors, and their greatest battles were often the ones that were fought within the quiet confines of their own minds. The echoes of war, the post-revolutionary lives of the silent warriors. The end of the war did not mean the end of the story for the silent warriors. The habits of secrecy, the weight of their experiences, and the profound changes that the revolution had wrought upon their world would shape the remainder of their lives. They had been instrumental in the birth of a new nation, and now they had to find their place in it. For some, the transition was a smooth one. For others, the echoes of the silent war would reverberate for the rest of their days. Benjamin Tallmadge, the spymaster, was the most public figure of the group. He emerged from the war a respected and decorated officer, his reputation for intelligence and integrity well established. He married the daughter of a wealthy loyalist, a union that in itself was a symbol of the reconciliation that the new nation so desperately needed. He became a successful merchant and banker, and his election to Congress was a natural extension of his wartime leadership. He was a man who was comfortable in the new republic, a man who had helped to build it and who now took his place among its leaders. Yet, even in his public life, he remained the discreet spymaster. His memoirs, written late in his life, are frustratingly vague about the details of the Culper ring. He took the secrets of his agents to the grave, a final act of loyalty to the men and women who had placed their lives in his hands. Abraham Woodhull, the reluctant spy, returned to the life he had always wanted, the life of a farmer and a family man. He became a magistrate in his local community, a respected, if somewhat reserved, figure. The anxieties of his wartime service seemed to have subsided, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. Yet, the shadow of Samuel Culper never entirely left him. He remained a man of few words, a man who kept his own counsel. The experience of the war had taught him the value of silence, and it was a lesson he never forgot. Robert Townsend's post-war life was perhaps the most poignant. He returned to his business, but he was a changed man. The moral compromises of his wartime service weighed heavily on him. He never married, and he became increasingly reclusive as he grew older. He devoted himself to his business and to quiet acts of philanthropy, as if seeking to atone for the deceptions of his past. His secret remained safe, his contribution to the revolution unknown. It was not until the 20th century, when the historian Morton Pennypacker uncovered his correspondence, that the world would learn the identity of Samuel Culper. Jr. Townsend's story is a powerful reminder that the wounds of war are not always visible, and that the price of patriotism can be a lifetime of quiet regret. James Armistead Lafayette, the enslaved man who had outwitted the British High Command, faced a different kind of post-war struggle. His initial petitions for freedom were denied, a cruel irony for a man who had risked so much for the cause of liberty. It was only through the direct intervention of the Marquis de Lafayette, who wrote a powerful letter to the Virginia legislature on his behalf, that he was finally granted his freedom. He adopted the surname of his patron and settled on a small farm in Virginia, a free man in a nation that was still grappling with the profound contradiction of slavery. His story is a testament to the complex and often unjust legacy of the Revolution, a reminder that the fight for freedom did not end with the Treaty of Paris. And what of the women, the invisible warriors of the Revolution? Their stories are even more difficult to trace. Anna Strong, Lydia Darragh, and the countless other women who contributed to the war effort faded back into the domestic sphere, their contributions largely unrecorded and unacknowledged. They were the silent partners in the great enterprise of the Revolution, their stories passed down through family lore, but rarely finding their way into the official histories. The rediscovery of their stories in recent years has been a vital corrective to the traditional, male-dominated narrative of the war, a recognition that the Revolution was a collective effort, a struggle that was waged on many fronts, by many different kinds of people. The post-war lives of the silent warriors are a powerful and moving epilogue to the story of the secret war. They are a reminder that the end of a conflict is not the end of its impact, and that the experiences of war continue to shape the lives of individuals and nations for generations to come. They are a testament to the quiet courage of ordinary people, the resilience of the human spirit, and the enduring power of a cause that was greater than any one individual. They were the silent warriors, and their legacy is not just the nation they helped to create, but the quiet, dignified lives they led in the peace that they had fought so hard to win. Uncovering the secrets, the historical detective work The Story of the Culper Ring is a story that was almost lost to time, a secret that was kept so well that it took more than a century of historical detective work to bring it to light. The process of uncovering this hidden history is a fascinating story in itself, a tale of dedicated historians, of dusty archives, and of the thrill of discovering a long-lost secret. It is a testament to the fact that history is not a static, unchanging thing, but a living, breathing discipline, constantly being revised and enriched by new discoveries. For many years after the Revolution, the story of Washington's spies was a matter of rumor and speculation. The main figures, like Benjamin Tallmadge, were known to have been involved in intelligence work, but the specifics of their operations remained a closely guarded secret. The first major breakthrough came in the mid-19th century, with the publication of the memoirs of some of the key figures of the Revolution. These accounts provided tantalizing glimpses into the world of revolutionary espionage, but they were often vague and incomplete. The full story remained hidden. The key to unlocking the secrets of the Culper ring lay in the archives, in the vast collections of letters and documents that had been preserved from the Revolutionary era. But finding the relevant documents was like searching for a needle in a haystack. The spies had been careful to cover their tracks, using codes, invisible ink, and pseudonyms to obscure their identities. It would take a new kind of historian, a historical detective, to piece together the puzzle. That historian was Morton Pennypacker. In the 1920s, Pennypacker, a local historian from Long Island, became obsessed with the story of the Culper ring. He spent years scouring the archives, poring over old letters, and chasing down local legends. His breakthrough came when he discovered a collection of letters between Abraham Woodhull and Robert Townsend. The letters were written in a cryptic style, with many references to their secret activities. Pennypacker, through a process of painstaking analysis and cross-referencing, was able to decode the letters and to identify Townsend as the mysterious Samuel Culper, Jr. It was a stunning discovery, a moment of historical revelation that finally brought the full story of the Culper ring to light. Pennypacker's work was a landmark in the study of the American Revolution. It demonstrated the crucial role that intelligence had played in the war, and it brought to life the stories of the ordinary people who had been its silent warriors. His book, General Washington's Spies, published in 1939, became the definitive account of the Culper ring, and it remains a classic of American historical writing. Since Pennypacker's time, historians have continued to build on his work, uncovering new details and new perspectives on the secret war. The use of new technologies, such as digital archives and searchable databases, has made it possible to connect the dots in ways that were unimaginable in Pennypacker's day. The stories of women, of African Americans, and of other marginalized groups have been brought to the forefront, providing a richer and more complete picture of the Revolutionary era. The story of the uncovering of the Culper ring is a powerful reminder of the importance of historical research. It is a testament to the dedication and perseverance of the historians who have devoted their lives to the pursuit of truth. And it is a thrilling example of the power of history to surprise us, to reveal hidden worlds, and to connect us to the people and events of the past in new and unexpected ways. The silent warriors of the Revolution may have intended for their secrets to remain hidden forever, but thanks to the work of generations of historical detectives, their story can now be told, their courage can be celebrated, and their legacy can be honored. The King's men, inside the British intelligence machine to paint the Culper ring as an isolated force operating in a vacuum is to tell only half the story. Their every move was shadowed by a formidable and deeply entrenched adversary, the British Intelligence Service. This was not a hastily assembled group of amateurs, but a professional, state-sponsored apparatus, the product of centuries of European intrigue and global empire building. For the King's men in New York, the American rebellion was not just a military problem, it was an insurgency, and the battle for information was as critical as any engagement on the field. Their mission was to infiltrate, to disrupt, and to dismantle the nascent American intelligence networks before they could tip the scales of the war. The nerve center of this operation was, for a crucial period, the office of Major John André. André was the antithesis of the rustic American spies he hunted. He was the polished product of a European military tradition, a man who could write a sonnet, sketch a portrait, and order an execution with equal aplomb. He was ambitious, certainly, but he was also a deeply patriotic Englishman who believed fervently in the cause of the crown. He saw the American rebels as misguided traitors, and he pursued them with a relentless and methodical determination. André's approach was twofold. First, he had to protect the secrets of the British Army. This meant enforcing a strict code of conduct among the officers, discouraging loose talk in the city's taverns and coffee houses, and creating a culture of security awareness. He knew that the city was a sieve, that every ship movement, every troop rotation, was being watched. His task was to plug the leaks, to make the city an opaque and impenetrable fortress of information. This was a constant and often frustrating battle. The arrogance of the British officer class, their disdain for the colonial rebels, often made them careless. André was constantly fighting against the ingrained belief that the Americans were an inferior and unsophisticated enemy. Second, and more importantly, André had to go on the offensive. He had to actively hunt the American spies, to turn their own methods against them. He recruited a network of loyalist informants, creating a web of eyes and ears that stretched across the city and into the surrounding countryside. These informants were a diverse group. Some were wealthy merchants who saw their fortunes tied to the British Empire. Others were ordinary citizens who remained loyal to the king out of a sense of duty or tradition. And some were simply opportunists, willing to sell information for a handful of silver. One of André's most effective, and most controversial, tactics was the use of double agents. He would identify potential weak links in the American network, individuals who were perhaps disgruntled, in debt, or simply afraid, and he would turn them. He would use a combination of threats, bribes, and promises of protection to convince them to betray their comrades. This was the dark art of espionage, the manipulation of human weakness for strategic gain. It was a game at which André excelled. The case of James Moody, the loyalist partisan, illustrates the aggressive nature of British counterintelligence. Moody was not just a spy, he was a disruptor. His raids were designed to sow chaos and fear, to demonstrate the reach and the power of the crown. His capture of Governor Livingston's papers was a classic example of this strategy. It was not just an intelligence victory, it was a psychological one, a message to the rebels that even their highest leaders were not safe. The British also had a significant technological advantage. Their methods of mail interception were highly sophisticated. They had developed techniques for opening and resealing letters that were almost undetectable. They had a team of expert cryptanalysts who were skilled at breaking the simple ciphers used by many of the American agents. The Culper ring's use of a more complex numerical code and, crucially, invisible ink, was a direct response to this British capability. They knew that any letter they sent through the regular channels was likely to be read by the enemy. The constant cat-and-mouse game between the Culper ring and André's shadow catchers was a duel of wits, a battle of innovation and adaptation. When the British began to scrutinize travelers more closely, the Culper ring devised more elaborate covers. When the British cracked a simple code, the Culper ring developed a more complex one. It was a constant cycle of action and reaction, a silent arms race in the shadows of the Revolution. The psychological pressure on the British agents was also immense. They were operating in a hostile environment, surrounded by a population that was, at best, ambivalent, and at worst, actively hostile. They faced the constant threat of assassination, of ambush, of being betrayed by the very people they were trying to recruit. The loyalists who worked for André were seen as traitors by their neighbors, their property subject to confiscation, their families to ostracism. They, too, were paying a heavy price for their allegiance. The story of British counterintelligence is not a story of villains, but of adversaries. They were men who were fighting for their country, for their king, for a world order that they believed to be right and just. They were as brave, as resourceful, and as committed as their American counterparts. Their failure to dismantle the Culper ring is not a reflection of their incompetence, but a testament to the extraordinary skill and resilience of the American spies. The Silent War was a battle of equals, a clash of two determined and resourceful intelligence networks, and in the end, it was the side with the greater cause, the more profound motivation, that emerged victorious. The king's men were good, but the silent warriors of the Revolution, fighting for the birth of a new nation, were better. The tools of the trade, the technology of 18th-century espionage, the secret war of the American Revolution was fought not with the advanced technologies of modern warfare, but with the simple, yet ingenious, tools of the 18th century. The spies of the Culper ring were masters of a kind of analog cryptography, of a homespun tradecraft that relied on cleverness, patience, and a deep understanding of human nature. Their methods, though primitive by today's standards, were remarkably effective, and they provide a fascinating window into the world of 18th century espionage. The cornerstone of their security was the code. The numerical substitution system devised by Benjamin Tallmadge was a work of simple genius. It was not a complex mathematical algorithm, but a straightforward dictionary, a list of words, names, and places, each with a corresponding number. The security of the code lay not in its complexity, but in its exclusivity. Only a handful of people had access to the codebook, the dictionary that was the key to unlocking the messages. This limited distribution was a critical security measure. The more people who knew the code, the greater the risk of it being compromised. The code was a living document, constantly being updated and revised. New words were added as needed, and the numbers were occasionally changed to thwart any potential cryptanalysts. The use of numbers instead of letters also had another, more subtle advantage. A string of numbers was less likely to arouse suspicion than a jumble of letters. It could be disguised as a list of accounts, a merchant's inventory, or a mathematical exercise. It was a form of steganography, the art of hiding a message in plain sight. But the true masterpiece of their tradecraft was the use of invisible ink. The concept of sympathetic stains had been known for centuries, but it was Washington who championed its use as a tool of espionage. He had read about it in a book on the subject, and he was fascinated by its potential. He provided Tallmadge with the formula for the ink and the reagent, and he personally instructed him on its use. The ink was made from a mixture of ferrous sulfate and water. It was a clear liquid that, when used to write on paper, would leave no visible trace. The message would only become visible when the paper was brushed with the reagent, a solution of sodium carbonate. The chemical reaction would cause the writing to appear in a brownish color. The use of invisible ink was a game-changer. It allowed the spies to embed their secret messages within the text of an ordinary letter. A business order, a family letter, a page from a book, any document could become a vessel for secret intelligence. This was the ultimate form of concealment. Even if a letter were intercepted and the code deciphered, the invisible message would remain hidden, its secret safe. The British were aware of the existence of invisible ink, but detecting it was another matter. It required a level of scrutiny that was often impractical, and the spies took great care to make their cover letters as mundane and as unsuspicious as possible. The dead drop was another critical tool of their trade. This was a prearranged location where messages could be left and retrieved without the sender and the receiver ever having to meet. This was a vital security measure. It broke the chain of contact, making it much more difficult for the British to capture the entire network. If a courier were captured, he would only know the location of the dead drop, not the identity of the person who had left the message or the person who was due to pick it up. The dead drops were chosen with great care. They had to be places that were both accessible and inconspicuous, places that would not attract attention. A hollow tree, a loose stone in a wall, a specific grave in a churchyard, these were the secret mailboxes of the Revolution. And then there were the signals, the silent language that was used to communicate across distances. Anna Strong's clothesline was the most famous example, but there were others. A certain window left open, a particular book placed on a windowsill, a specific pattern of knots in a rope, these were the subtle signals that were used to indicate that a message was ready, that a courier had arrived, or that danger was near. This was a language of pure observation, a silent conversation that was understood only by the initiated. The tools of the trade of the 18th century spy were simple, but they were used with a level of skill and ingenuity that is truly remarkable. The spies of the Culper ring were not just brave, they were clever. They were masters of a kind of practical magic, of a homespun science of secrecy. They turned the ordinary objects of their everyday lives into the instruments of a revolution. And in doing so, they demonstrated that the most powerful weapon in the arsenal of freedom is not a sword or a gun, but the power of the human mind to innovate, to adapt, and to overcome. A Tale of Two Cities. The contrast between occupied New York and Washington's camp. The Silent War was a tale of two cities, a study in contrasts between the occupied metropolis of New York and the rustic, mobile headquarters of the Continental Army. The intelligence that flowed from one to the other was a lifeline, a bridge of information that connected two vastly different worlds. To understand the significance of this intelligence, one must understand the stark differences between the two environments. New York was a city of intrigue, of opulence, of decay. It was the center of British power in North America, a place of grand balls and military parades. But beneath this glittering surface was a world of poverty, of disease, of desperation. The city was a pressure cooker, a place of constant tension and suspicion. For the spies of the Culper ring, it was a world of constant performance, of a double life lived in the shadow of the gallows. Washington's headquarters, by contrast, was a world of rustic simplicity, of military discipline, of shared purpose. It was not a fixed location, but a mobile camp, moving with the rhythms of the war. It was a world of tents and log huts, of meager rations and harsh winters. But it was also a world of profound camaraderie, of a shared commitment to a cause that was greater than any one individual. For Washington and his officers, the intelligence that arrived from New York was a precious and eagerly awaited commodity, a window into the mind of the enemy. The arrival of a courier from the Culper ring was a moment of great anticipation. The message would be rushed to Washington's tent, where the general and his closest aides would gather to decipher its contents. The process of applying the reagent, of watching the invisible words appear, must have been a moment of quiet drama, of a secret being brought to light. The deciphered message would then be studied, its implications debated, its value assessed. A single message could change the course of a campaign, could save a fleet, could avert a disaster. The intelligence provided by the Culper ring was not just about troop movements and naval preparations. It was also about the morale of the enemy, the state of their supplies, the political divisions within their leadership. This was the kind of soft intelligence that was often just as valuable as the hard data of military strength. It allowed Washington to understand the psychology of his adversary, to exploit their weaknesses, to anticipate their reactions. The contrast between the two worlds was not just a matter of physical environment, it was a matter of ideology. New York was a city that represented the old world, the world of monarchy, of aristocracy, of empire. Washington's camp was the incubator of a new world, a world of republicanism, of democracy, of self-determination. The Silent War was, in a very real sense, a battle between these two worlds, a struggle for the future of a continent. The spies of the Culper ring were the bridge between these two worlds. They were the ones who moved between the shadows of the old and the dawn of the new. They were the conduits of the information that would help to ensure that the new world would prevail. Their story is a powerful reminder that the American Revolution was not just a military conflict, it was a battle of ideas, a struggle for the soul of a new nation. And it was a battle that was won not just by the soldiers on the field, but by the silent warriors who fought their battles in the secret corridors of the human mind. The Devil and the Deep Blue Sea, A Night on the Sound with Caleb Brewster. The Long Island Sound, on a calm summer's day, could be a place of serene and deceptive beauty. But on a moonless night, with a rising wind and the ever-present threat of the Royal Navy, it was a liquid battlefield, a treacherous gray expanse where the slightest miscalculation could lead to capture or a watery grave. This was the domain of Caleb Brewster, the whaleboatman of the Culper ring, and his courage was of a different sort than that of the landsmen. It was a physical, visceral courage, a deep intimacy with the sea, and a gambler's nerve. Let us imagine one such night. A signal has been given, the black petticoat on Anna Strong's line, and Brewster knows a message awaits him. He has spent the day preparing his whaleboat, a long, narrow craft designed for speed and stealth. It is powered by oars, not sail, making it quiet and maneuverable, perfect for slipping through the British patrols. He has checked every oarlock, every plank, ensuring his vessel is sound. His crew, a small group of trusted men as familiar with the sound as he is, are ready. They are not soldiers, but they are warriors in their own right, their allegiance sworn not in a formal oath, but in the shared danger of these clandestine voyages. As dusk settles, they push off from the Connecticut shore. The air is heavy, the sky a bruised purple that promises a storm. Brewster stands at the tiller, his eyes scanning the horizon, his face a mask of concentration. He is not just a boatman, he is a navigator, a tactician, a leader of men. He knows the currents of the sound as well as he knows the lines on his own hand. He knows the hidden coves, the submerged rocks, the tidal rips that can trap an unwary vessel. This knowledge is his greatest weapon. The first few miles are a tense but steady rhythm of oar strokes, the boat gliding through the water like a phantom. The only sounds are the dip and pull of the oars, the creak of the wood, the whisper of the wind. Every man is on high alert, their senses straining for the sight of a sail, the sound of a distant bell, the telltale flicker of a lantern that would signal a British patrol. Then, they see it. A dark shape against the darker horizon, the unmistakable silhouette of a British sloop of war, a wolf pack hunter of the Sound. It is positioned directly in their path. A wave of adrenaline surges through the boat. To be caught in the open water by a vessel of that size and power would be suicide. Brewster has a split second to make a decision. He does not panic. He gives a low, sharp command. The oars are pulled, and the boat's momentum carries it forward, silently. Brewster steers them towards a small, rocky island, a place he knows is too treacherous for the deep-drafted sloop to approach. It is a gamble. The currents around the island are notoriously unpredictable, and the rocks are like jagged teeth just beneath the surface. But it is their only chance. They slip into the shadow of the island, the granite cliffs providing a welcome cover. The men hold their breath, their knuckles white on the oars. They can hear the shouts of the British sailors carrying across the water, the creak of the sloop's rigging. It is a moment of pure, agonizing tension. They are mice, hiding from a hawk. The sloop passes, its dark shape a malevolent presence in the night. It does not see them. The British, confident in their control of the Sound, are not expecting a small boat to be out in this weather, in this treacherous channel. Their arrogance is Brewster's ally. He waits, his patience a tangible force, until the sloop is a safe distance away. Then, with another quiet command, the oars dip back into the water, and they resume their journey. The danger has passed, but the tension remains. The storm that the sky had promised is now beginning to break. The wind picks up, whipping the surface of the Sound into a frenzy of whitecaps. The rain begins to fall, cold and hard. The whaleboat is tossed about like a cork in a bathtub. The men row with a desperate, burning intensity, their muscles straining against the power of the sea. Water crashes over the bow, drenching them, chilling them to the bone. This is no longer a game of stealth, it is a battle for survival. Brewster, at the tiller, is a figure of immense concentration, his body braced against the lurching of the boat, his eyes fixed on the unseen shoreline. He is steering by instinct, by a deep, intuitive knowledge of the sea that cannot be taught. Hours later, soaked, exhausted, and freezing, they finally reach the Long Island shore. They have made it. Brewster finds the designated cove, a small, hidden inlet that is invisible from the open water. He leaves his men with the boat and makes his way inland, to the dead drop where Woodhull has left the message. He finds it, a small oilskin-wrapped packet, and tucks it safely inside his coat. The secret is now his. The journey back is just as perilous. The storm is still raging, and the threat of British patrols is ever present. But they are driven now by a sense of accomplishment, by the knowledge that they have succeeded in their mission. They are the vital link in the chain, the artery that connects the brain of the operation in New York to the heart of the revolution in Washington's camp. As the first, faint light of dawn breaks over the Connecticut shore, they finally return, their mission complete. They are met by Tallmadge, who takes the precious packet from Brewster's hand. There are no parades, no medals, no public recognition for their bravery. Their reward is the quiet satisfaction of a job well done, of a blow struck for the cause of liberty. Caleb Brewster and his men have once again braved the devil and the deep blue sea, and they have won. This single night, this single crossing, is a microcosm of the silent war. It is a story of courage, of skill, of a deep and abiding commitment to a cause. It is a reminder that the war for independence was fought not just by armies on the land, but by a handful of brave men in a small boat, on a dark and stormy sea. The home front, life and resistance on occupied Long Island. The story of the Culper Ring is inextricably linked to the landscape of Long Island, a place of quiet farming communities that was thrust onto the front lines of the Revolution. The British occupation transformed this pastoral landscape into a place of tension, of divided loyalties, and of quiet, simmering resistance. To understand the spy ring, one must understand the world in which it operated, the community that both sustained and endangered it. For the people of Connecticut and the surrounding towns, the arrival of the British was a profound and unwelcome disruption. The red-coated soldiers became a constant presence, their patrols a reminder of the loss of local autonomy. The best homes were often commandeered for officers, the local taverns filled with boisterous and arrogant soldiers. The farmers were forced to sell their produce to the British Army, often for a pittance, their hard labor now feeding the very men who were suppressing their liberty. Loyalties were deeply divided. Long Island had a significant loyalist population, people who remained faithful to the king out of a sense of tradition, of economic self-interest, or of a genuine belief in the cause of the crown. This created a climate of suspicion and mistrust. Neighbor was pitted against neighbor, and family against family. A careless word, a perceived slight, could lead to an accusation of treason. The community was a tinderbox, and the war was the spark that threatened to set it ablaze. It was in this environment that the Culper Ring was born. The members of the ring were not outsiders, they were deeply embedded in the community. They were farmers, tavern keepers, and housewives, people who were known and, for the most part, trusted by their neighbors. This was their greatest protection. Their ordinary lives were their best disguise. Who would suspect that Abraham Woodhull, the quiet and unassuming farmer, was a spymaster? Who would imagine that Anna Strong, the respectable wife and mother, was a key figure in a clandestine intelligence network? But their deep roots in the community were also their greatest vulnerability. They were surrounded by people who knew them, who watched them, who might, for a variety of reasons, betray them. The threat of discovery was not just the threat of a distant, impersonal enemy, it was the threat of a neighbor, a former friend, a disgruntled relative. This was the intimate, personal nature of the war on Long Island. The women of Long Island played a particularly crucial role in this culture of resistance. While the men were often away, serving in the militia or the Continental Army, the women were left to manage the farms, the businesses, and the households. They became the backbone of the community, the silent guardians of the home front. And in this role, they were uniquely positioned to gather and to share information. The marketplace was a hub of intelligence. Women from the surrounding farms would gather to sell their produce, and in the process, they would exchange news and observations. They would talk about the movements of British patrols, the state of their supplies, the morale of the soldiers. This was not a formal intelligence network, but an informal, organic flow of information, a grassroots resistance that was as vital as it was unseen. The church was another important center of community and of resistance. The sermons of a patriot minister could be a source of inspiration and of coded messages. The gatherings after the service were an opportunity to share information and to coordinate activities. The church was a sanctuary, a place where the community could come together and reaffirm their commitment to the cause, even under the watchful eyes of the British. The story of the Culper Ring is not just the story of a handful of spies, it is the story of a community at war. It is the story of a people who refused to be cowed by a powerful and oppressive enemy, who found ways to resist, to fight back, to keep the flame of liberty alive in the darkest of times. The spies of the Culper ring were the leaders of this resistance, but they were not alone. They were supported by a network of ordinary people, the silent majority who, through their quiet acts of courage and their unwavering commitment to the cause, made the secret war possible. The home front was the silent battlefield of the Revolution, and it was here, in the hearts and minds of the people of Long Island, that the war for independence was truly won. The long shadow, the legacy of the Culper ring in American intelligence. The Culper ring was disbanded at the end of the Revolutionary War, its members fading back into the quiet anonymity of civilian life. But the legacy of their service, the principles of their tradecraft, and the very idea of a civilian-led intelligence agency would cast a long shadow over the future of the new nation. The silent warriors of the Revolution were the founding fathers of American intelligence, and their influence can be traced through the centuries, from the clandestine operations of the Civil War to the global reach of the Central Intelligence Agency. In the immediate aftermath of the Revolution, there was a deep-seated suspicion of standing armies and of secret government agencies. The new republic was founded on the principles of openness and accountability, and the idea of a permanent, professional intelligence service was seen as a threat to liberty, a tool of the European monarchies that the Revolution had fought to escape. For many years, the United States had no formal intelligence agency. When a crisis arose, a temporary network would be established, often modeled on the ad hoc, citizen-based structure of the Culper ring. The Civil War was a turning point. Both the Union and the Confederacy established their own secret services, and the war became a hotbed of espionage and counter-espionage. The methods used were often strikingly similar to those of the Culper ring: networks of civilian agents, the use of codes and ciphers, the importance of misinformation and deception. The famous Union spy, Elizabeth Van Lew, who operated a spy ring in the Confederate capital of Richmond, was a direct descendant of the Culper tradition. Like Robert Townsend, she was a respected member of society who used her position to gather intelligence. Like Anna Strong, she used a system of signals and dead drops to communicate with her agents. The spirit of the Culper ring was alive and well in the secret war between the states. It was not until the 20th century, with the rise of global conflicts and the advent of new technologies, that the United States established a permanent, professional intelligence agency. The Office of Strategic Services, OSS, the forerunner of the CIA, was created during World War II. The OSS was a sophisticated, modern organization, but its founders drew heavily on the lessons of the past. They studied the history of American espionage, from the Culper ring to the Civil War, and they incorporated the timeless principles of tradecraft into their training and operations. The core principles of the Culper ring are still relevant today. The importance of human intelligence, of having agents on the ground who can provide context and nuance that technology cannot. The need for a secure and reliable system of communication. The art of creating and maintaining a cover identity. The use of deception and misinformation to mislead the enemy. These are the fundamental building blocks of espionage, as true today as they were in 1778. The Culper ring also established a uniquely American tradition of intelligence, one that is rooted in the idea of the citizen spy. The members of the ring were not professional soldiers or government bureaucrats, they were ordinary people who were moved to act by a sense of patriotic duty. This idea, that the defense of the nation is the responsibility of all its citizens, is a powerful and enduring part of the American identity. It is a legacy that can be seen in the civilian experts who are recruited by the intelligence community for their specialized knowledge, in the ordinary people who report suspicious activity to the authorities, in the enduring belief that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. The story of the Culper ring is more than just a fascinating chapter in the history of the American Revolution. It is the origin story of American intelligence. It is a testament to the fact that the most powerful weapon in the arsenal of a democracy is not its military might, but the courage, the ingenuity, and the commitment of its citizens. The silent warriors of the Revolution laid a foundation, a tradition of service and of sacrifice, that continues to this day. They were the first, and in many ways, the greatest, generation of American spies, and their long shadow stretches from the shores of Long Island to the farthest corners of the globe, a constant reminder of the secret war that has always been, and will always be, a part of the struggle for freedom. The ghost in the machine, the unsolved mysteries of the secret war. For all that has been uncovered about the Culper ring, the secret war of the Revolution remains a landscape riddled with shadows and whispers, a place of unsolved mysteries and lingering questions. The very success of the ring's security measures has ensured that parts of its story will forever remain elusive, lost to the passage of time and the deliberate destruction of evidence. These historical ghosts, these unanswered questions, add a layer of profound and tantalizing intrigue to the narrative, reminding us that the past is never fully known, and that some secrets are destined to be kept forever. The most famous and enduring of these mysteries is the identity of Agent 355. This code number appears in a letter from Abraham Woodhull to George Washington, referring to a woman in New York who was a key part of Robert Townsend's intelligence-gathering operation. Woodhull's letter suggests that Agent 355 had access to the highest levels of British command and was instrumental in uncovering Benedict Arnold's treason. He wrote that she was one of our dear friends and that her intelligence had been the means of saving the army. This is high praise indeed, suggesting a figure of immense importance. Who was this mysterious woman? The historical record is silent. No name is ever attached to the number. This has led to centuries of speculation, a historical parlor game played by historians and amateur detectives alike. Was she a prominent loyalist lady, moving in the same social circles as Major John André? Was she a mistress to a high-ranking British officer, using her position to glean secrets in moments of intimacy? Was she a member of Townsend's own family, a sister or a cousin, whose involvement he sought to protect above all else? One popular theory is that she was Anna Strong, and that the number 355 was a kind of code for her name, though the logic of this is convoluted. Another theory suggests she was the wife of another spy, her identity subsumed by that of her husband. A more romantic, and perhaps more tragic, theory is that she was a young woman who was in love with Robert Townsend, and that her involvement in the spy ring was an act of personal devotion as much as patriotic duty. Some have even speculated that she was captured and died on a British prison ship, her identity never revealed, her sacrifice a final, silent act of defiance. The truth is, we will likely never know. The identity of Agent 355 is a secret that the Culper ring took to the grave. But the mystery itself is a powerful symbol. It represents the countless women who contributed to the revolution in ways that were never recorded, whose names are lost to history, but whose courage and sacrifice were no less real. Agent 355 is the unknown soldier of the secret war, the embodiment of the invisible army of women who fought for liberty in the shadows. Another lingering mystery is the full extent of the Culper ring's operations. While the core members have been identified, it is almost certain that there were others, a wider network of informants, couriers, and safe housekeepers whose identities remain unknown. Who were the men who rowed Caleb Brewster's whaleboat? Who were the tavern keepers who passed along whispers they had overheard? Who were the farmers who allowed their barns to be used as dead drops? These were the foot soldiers of the secret war, the unsung heroes whose small acts of courage were the foundation upon which the entire enterprise was built. There are also questions about the specific intelligence that was passed. While we know about the major successes, the foiling of the attack on the French fleet, the exposure of Arnold's treason, it is likely that the ring provided a steady stream of more mundane, but equally valuable, intelligence. Information about supply shortages, about troop morale, about the political debates in London, all of this would have been vital to Washington's strategic planning. The full impact of the Culper ring cannot be measured solely by its most dramatic successes, but by the cumulative effect of the steady, reliable flow of information it provided over a period of 5 long years. And what of the British side? Are there still undiscovered loyalist spies, men and women who worked for André and his successors, whose stories have yet to be told? The British were notoriously meticulous record keepers, but much of their intelligence archive from the Revolution has been lost or destroyed. It is possible that there are still secrets buried in the archives in London, waiting for a future historian to uncover them. These unsolved mysteries are not a frustration, they are an invitation. They are a call to humility, a reminder that our knowledge of the past is always incomplete. They are a spur to further research, a challenge to future generations of historians to continue the detective work, to keep searching for the clues that will illuminate the shadows. And they are a source of endless fascination, a reminder that the story of the American Revolution is not a closed book, but a living, breathing narrative, with secrets still to be revealed and stories still to be told. The ghosts of the Secret War are still with us, their whispers a faint but constant echo in the corridors of American history. The unseen scars, the lasting impact on the silent warriors. The end of a war is marked by treaties and parades, but for the soldiers who fight it, the conflict never truly ends. It lives on in their memories, in their dreams, in the unseen scars that they carry with them for the rest of their days. For the silent warriors of the Culper ring, these scars were particularly deep and complex. They had not faced the enemy on an open battlefield, but in the intimate, treacherous landscape of their own communities, their own homes, their own minds. The psychological toll of this kind of warfare was profound, and it would shape their post-war lives in ways that are both subtle and significant. Consider the case of Abraham Woodhull. He returned to his farm, the prodigal son come home to the land he loved. But the land was no longer a place of simple, uncomplicated peace. It was a place of memories, of secrets, of close calls. The old oak tree at the edge of his property was not just a tree, it was a dead drop, a place of danger and of triumph. The quiet country roads were not just paths for his wagon, they were the routes of his clandestine journeys, the scenes of his near capture. The war had imprinted itself upon the landscape of his life, and he could never again see it with the innocent eyes of his youth. His relationships with his neighbors were also forever changed. He had lived a lie among them for 5 years. He had smiled and nodded, had shared a drink and a story, all the while guarding a secret that could have cost them their lives. How does one simply return to normal after that? The habit of suspicion, the instinct for deception, the deep-seated awareness of the fragility of trust, these are not things that can be easily unlearned. Woodhull became a respected member of his community, but he was always a man apart, a man who held a piece of himself in reserve, a man who knew the darkness that could lie beneath the surface of a peaceful, orderly world. Robert Townsend's scars were of a different, and perhaps deeper, kind. His were the scars of a moral wound, a conflict between his duty and his faith that was never fully resolved. He had contributed to a violent conflict, had engaged in deception, had betrayed the trust of men who considered him a friend. For a man of his Quaker principles, this was a heavy burden to bear. His post-war reclusiveness, his decision never to marry, his quiet philanthropy, all of these can be seen as the actions of a man who is seeking a kind of redemption, a way to balance the scales of his own conscience. He was haunted by the ghost of Major John André. The two men had been social acquaintances, and Townsend had been instrumental in the events that led to André's execution. He had seen the young, charismatic British officer in the coffeehouses and drawing rooms of New York, and he had been a part of the secret war that had brought him to the gallows. The tragedy of André's fate, the waste of his talent and his life, was a powerful and disturbing symbol of the human cost of the war. It is said that Townsend could never again bring himself to visit the city of New York, the scene of his secret life and of André's tragic end. The other members of the ring carried their own unseen scars. Caleb Brewster, the daring boatman, had faced death on a nightly basis. The sea, which had been his livelihood, had become his battlefield. He had survived, but the memory of the storms, of the close calls with British warships, would forever be a part of him. Anna Strong, the resourceful housewife, had turned her home into a station on the Underground Railroad of the Revolution. She had lived with the constant fear that her domestic world could be shattered at any moment by the intrusion of the war. She had protected her family and her country, but the price had been the loss of her own sense of security. The story of the unseen scars of the silent warriors is a powerful and important part of their legacy. It is a reminder that the cost of war is not just measured in lives lost and cities burned, but in the quiet, internal struggles of the individuals who are caught in its grasp. It is a testament to the profound psychological resilience of the human spirit, the ability of ordinary people to endure unimaginable stress and to emerge, not unscathed, but whole. And it is a call to empathy, a challenge to us to look beyond the grand narratives of history and to see the human faces of the men and women who fought its battles, both seen and unseen. The silent warriors of the Revolution won a great victory for their country, but they paid a heavy price for it, a price that was written not in the pages of the history books, but in the quiet, hidden corners of their own souls. The final testament, what the silent warriors would tell us today if the silent warriors of the American Revolution could speak to us today, across the gulf of more than 2 centuries, what would they say? What lessons would they offer to a generation that lives in a world so vastly different from their own, yet a world that is still grappling with the fundamental questions of liberty, of duty, of the price of freedom? Their voices are silent, their lives long past, but their story is a living testament, a message that echoes through the ages, a call to courage and to conscience that is as relevant today as it was on the shores of Long Island in 1778. They would tell us, first and foremost, that freedom is not a gift, it is a responsibility. It is not something that is bestowed upon us by a benevolent government or a powerful military. It is something that must be earned and defended by every generation. They would remind us that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance, not just against external enemies, but against the insidious forces of apathy, of complacency, of the slow erosion of our own rights and freedoms. They were ordinary people who were called upon to do extraordinary things, and they answered that call because they understood that the future of their nation depended on their courage and their sacrifice. They would tell us that the most powerful weapon in the arsenal of a free people is not a gun or a bomb, but the power of information. In a world of propaganda and misinformation, of fake news and echo chambers, the ability to discern the truth, to seek out reliable sources, to think critically and independently, is more important than ever. The Culper ring was a network of truth-tellers, of people who risked their lives to gather and to disseminate accurate information. They understood that an informed citizenry is the bedrock of a healthy democracy, and that the suppression of information is the first step on the road to tyranny. They would tell us that courage comes in many forms. It is not just the courage of the soldier on the battlefield, but the quiet courage of the individual who stands up for what is right, even when they are standing alone. It is the courage of the whistleblower, of the journalist who exposes corruption, of the citizen who speaks truth to power. It is the courage of the ordinary person who refuses to be silent in the face of injustice. The silent warriors of the Revolution were not heroes in the traditional sense. They did not seek glory or fame. They were motivated by a deep and abiding belief in a cause that was greater than themselves, and they were willing to risk everything for it. They would tell us that the fight for freedom is never truly over. It is a continuous struggle, a constant battle against the forces of oppression and tyranny. Every generation must fight its own battles, must confront its own challenges, must make its own sacrifices. The Revolution was not a single event, but the beginning of a long and ongoing process, a commitment to the ideals of liberty and justice that must be renewed with each passing generation. The silent warriors did their part, and now it is our turn. They would tell us to remember the forgotten, the overlooked, the marginalized. The story of the Revolution is not just the story of the founding fathers and the famous generals. It is the story of the ordinary people, the women, the enslaved, the farmers, the merchants, the housewives, who fought for freedom in their own ways. Their contributions were just as vital, their sacrifices just as real, and their stories deserve to be told. The silent warriors were the invisible army of the Revolution, and their legacy is a reminder that the most important contributions are often the ones that are made in the shadows, far from the glare of the public eye. And finally, they would tell us to never lose hope. They lived in a time of profound uncertainty, of overwhelming odds, of a future that was far from assured. They faced a powerful and determined enemy, and they had every reason to despair. But they did not. They held on to their belief in a better future, a future of liberty and justice, and they worked tirelessly to make that future a reality. They were the silent warriors, and their story is a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to overcome adversity, to fight for what is right, and to build a better world for future generations. Their message is not a relic of the past, it is a living call to action, a challenge to each of us to be the silent warriors of our own time. To stand up for what is right, to fight for justice, to defend the freedoms that they fought so hard to win. To be vigilant, to be informed, to be courageous. To remember the past, to honor the sacrifices of those who came before us, and to carry their legacy forward into the future. This is the final testament of the silent warriors of the American Revolution, and it is a message that we ignore at our peril. The story of the Revolutionary War's Underground Railroad is a story of the invisible threads that wove together the fabric of a new nation. It is a story of the quiet courage of ordinary people, of the power of information, of the enduring struggle for freedom. It is a story that begins in the shadows of occupied New York and ends in the sunlight of a new republic. But it is also a story that never truly ends, because the spirit of the silent warriors lives on in every American who cherishes the precious gift of liberty, who is willing to stand up for what is right, and who understands that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. They were the silent warriors, and their legacy is the nation we inherit, a nation conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. May we prove worthy of their sacrifice. May we honor their memory by continuing the fight for freedom, for justice, for a more perfect union. And may we never forget the silent warriors who, in the darkest hours of the Revolution, kept the flame of liberty alive, and who, through their quiet courage and their unwavering resolve, helped to give birth to a new nation, a beacon of hope for the world, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to overcome tyranny and to build a better future for all. If this story has awakened something in you, if it has resonated with the truth in your own heart, then our journey together has just begun. Subscribe to this channel. Join us as we continue to explore the hidden histories, the forgotten heroes, and the silent struggles that have shaped our world. The past is not a dead thing, it is a living presence, a source of inspiration and a guide for the future. Let us explore it together. Let us honor the memory of the silent warriors by carrying their legacy forward, by being the vigilant guardians of freedom in our own time. The story of the American Revolution is not just a chapter in a history book, it is a living testament to the power of ordinary people to change the world. And that power, that potential, resides in each and every one of us. The silent warriors showed us the way. Now it is our turn to walk the path, to carry the torch, to keep the flame of liberty burning bright for future generations. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Remember the silent warriors. Honor their sacrifice. And never ever give up the fight for freedom.